Yeah, that'd be pretty cool just to have someone with a diametrically opposed view, and then like we don't hate each other. We can just talk, chill, bang ideas off each other.
I think you would get more views if we
I can
did hate each
moderate.
other.
It's hard for me to hate anybody except for Hitler. The more I know about that guy, the more I just don't like him.
All right, I think we're live. We should be live, unless there was another technical issue in addition to my camera not working on Whereby.
I always see that we're live for like 15 seconds before you tell me I'm live anyway, so I try to be careful. I pick my nose 20 seconds prior.
All right. Yes, we are live. So, MJ, thanks for coming on. Appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
A little about myself. Wow. I wasn't even prepared to go there. I am really boring. I try to be funny. You said I was funny in the email, which was actually encouraging. That makes 2 people that ever told me that. That's good. I like that. I try to do the best with what I have, with what I've read. That's about it. I run a YouTube channel called Democracy the Dead. It's just a political idiom for tradition. I think I got that from Chesterton. And, just react to stuff, argue for stuff, admit I'm wrong all the time. That happens a lot more after I'm married, but I just like talking about, I think I got into philosophy when did I get into philosophy? I think like the late 90s. And then I found out a couple times that I was doing it wrong. Like 5 or 6, 7 years. And I'm like, oh no, I don't think I'm doing this right. I'm just reading history of philosophy. I'm not understanding like what's going on when they're actually doing it. It's not cool. Got sidetracked with literature a lot. I don't know. Joined the military 2010. Am I going on too long?
That's fine. Okay. Take as much time as you need.
Got it on 2016. Started my channel in 2018, I think, 19. Oh, got a bachelor's and master's degree in philosophy. That's probably important. Took a couple classes under Craig. That was pretty cool. Went to Houston Baptist University and Coastal Carolina University. Was going to do the PhD thing, and then I don't really like the academy very much. I feel like just the strictures that they have in different departments I feel like it ties me down at what I want to do. And I got a unique opportunity to kind of pursue different things after my wife agreed to be the breadwinner. And then I could stay home, raise the kids, and pursue stuff on my own, I guess.
Cool. And
what about you? Can you tell me about yourself?
My name is TJump. I sell bathtubs for a living via YouTube.
Dude, sweet.
Yes.
It sounds like Fight Club, actually. My name's Tyler Durden. I sell soap.
Yes, I sell the bathtubs along with the chairs to my followers exclusively. You have to subscribe to my channel to get a bathtub.
Oh, done. Doing it.
Also occasionally do YouTube videos.
Occasionally. I think I started watching your videos when I got to Lackland. I think that was 2019. And I was always like, oh my gosh, this guy is like, I spent like all these years reading all these things, and he's like dismissing everything I've read in 2 sentences. This guy's so annoying. And I can't stop watching you.
You made that like 8 hour.
I'm probably gonna run into a wall.
Yeah, you made that like 8 hour critique of my ontological argument. Critique.
Oh gosh. Oh no, wait, you had an 8 hour critique?
No, that was yours. You made what, 2 videos, both were like 3 hours long or something?
Yeah, just rambling. Yeah, that's my excuse. If you thought they were bad. If you thought they were good, it was just really precise reasoning and analysis. See, we would work good together, man.
Sure.
I swear, let's do it.
I'm trying to get more content anyway, so I'd like to do like find more regular kinds of things to do. So I'd definitely be down to do like a show with you once a week or once every 2 weeks or something, whatever works.
Awesome. I would love that. And stream it to my channel too, maybe? Make a playlist or something.
Let's exclusively stream it to my channel. You have no rights to it.
Copyright.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about the ontological thing. So could you give us the ontological argument, premise, conclusion?
Yeah, so I'm going to be very modest right now. you already know everything I'm going to say, so I'm going to come at this at a different angle. I think you already know the modal ontological argument, where you just say that conceive of a maximally excellent being, and if you add another excellence in there, which is modal excellence, you have maximal greatness, which is just maximal excellence in all the worlds. I think everything else would follow from that first premise. We have to first establish that that thing is metaphysically possible. And I would say that a parameter for determining that is just that the concept is logically coherent. It doesn't have a logical contradiction, and that the properties are logically composable in their superlative kind of nature. You kind of tweak these concepts to make them the best that they could possibly be, and that's where that maximal part comes from. But I will say this: I am not. It's really hard for me, anyway, personally. I have a weird relationship with the project of natural theology, in that I get frustrated when I hear the criticisms of it. And then when I'm defending it, I sense the flimsiness of the methodologies that are used to motivate the premises. I do. So I sympathize with you on that, because it would be really awesome to have a method, right, that is just as awesome as the empirical methods that the hard sciences use. I would love that. That would be amazing. And when I zoom out and I look at the fact that there's disagreement on what the appropriate methods are for establishing premises and philosophical arguments, it's really hard to set up a meta criteria to adjudicate between different methods, right? Because that's going to assume a certain kind of conception of how to do philosophy and what philosophy is, what its scope is, and what it's for, which gets into different. Oh God, this heater's on. I got to take that off. I will
we
end
have
up
matching
rambling, so please
sweatshirts.
cut me
We
off.
both got the Under Armour, the gray Under Armour
We
sweatshirt.
got the Under Armour. That thing's good. Gosh, it's just these heaters blowing right on me. The snow finally stopped. So I will say that it's the more I am the ontological argument, the more I see that it's a lot like Quine's criterion of ontological commitment. It's saying basically, if you are on board with the way a particular research project gets up off the ground in terms of being okay with intuition guided premise fishing, I guess you could say, if you're okay with that and you can motivate that method by the plausibility that you intuit as you latch on to particular cases, rather than having a criterion first, kind of like that Chisholm article, problem of a criterion. It's like, do you go with the method first or you start with particular cases? It seems to me that if you're on board with that, I think what's implied by going on board with that is that you're going to be ontologically committed to the existence of God. But the thing is, this idea of the transfer of justification, I would say, so the justification that you would have with that conclusion of whatever it is you're ontologically committed to, it has to have at least as much justification as the initial research project has, I would say, the parameters of the research project. And so if you don't think that intuition guided type research projects are even plausible from the get-go, I don't think that that would be persuasive to anybody. The argument as a whole would be persuasive to anybody. So it almost makes me want to go analyze what the nature of research projects are at this point. Not necessarily scientific research projects, but the way like Michael Ray uses it in, I don't know if you've read this book. He's got a certain view of research projects that kind of overlaps with Emir Lakatos's version. The thing about, or Lakatos, he would agree with you that you don't have a degenerative kind of research project if you have these kind of independent theories that are making these novel future testable predictions, and so it makes progress that way. Ray cashes out research projects in terms of just a series of methodological dispositions. So it's just like, how do you choose amongst methodological dispositions? It seems like you'd have to anchor your choice of methodological dispositions by whatever criteria you find attractive. There's another book, and again, cut me off whenever you want.
Well, sure, yeah, we can pause there. So
yeah,
the original methodology problem isn't really what I think is the biggest problem with the ontological argument. I'd say, like, let's grant that and say, if you think the ontological argument is a good way to justify the existence of stuff, then it leads to the conclusion that there's essentially infinitely many things that exist other than a god. So the ontological argument says essentially anything that is coherent and has some essence of greatness to it must exist, which means the pizza argument works just fine. Obviously, it wouldn't be literally a physical pizza. It would be the essence of a pizza. So you could say there is this
And
perfect
greatness would
essence.
be,
What?
yeah. And just greatness throws me off sometimes. I will agree with that term, but by greatness, all he means is necessity, right?
Yeah.
He has maximal excellence in all the worlds.
Yeah, it just exists in all possible worlds, essentially.
Yeah.
So you can say there's this property that is this object exists in all possible worlds, and we give that property the name greatness or something like that. And so if there is this property, which I would say you first need to give evidence that there is such a property, not just say it's logically possible. Even if we just grant that, if we just grant that, we could say that everything could have this property. There could be the essence of pizza, like not just a physical pizza, but like the property of what makes a pizza, the principle of pizza.
I got you. You're losing me just a little bit. Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
On that, when you say evidence for a property, what do you mean by that?
So the property of an object existing in all possible worlds, you have to show that that property is a true property, not just something we've made up in our heads. So, like mass, charge, spin, those are real properties that actually exist. Potato-ness, unicornness, not real properties that actually exist. We can make up properties and say they're possible, but if they are just in our imagination, it doesn't mean they're true.
And then could I ask, were you in the middle of a thought? Can I keep asking questions?
Yeah, it's fine.
Because when I'm listening to your analysis of the ontological argument, it throws me off because I think we're coming at this problem from two different conceptual schemes. So I want to get on the same page as you, and I want to use the concepts the same way you are, so I can see the world the way you see it. And try to sympathize with this, because it's really hard to twist my mind in the way that you see the world, to be completely honest. And I want to be as sympathetic as possible here. When you say, or maybe my mind's already twisted, when you say that a property, would you make a distinction between an imaginary property and a property that exists in a possible world?
Possible world? No.
Yeah.
Actual world, yes.
Neither would I. Oh, say it again? Actual world, yes. Right.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So I feel like when I do agree that at the beginning stages of the argument, I'm conceiving of a concept. And I'm not yet at the point, epistemically speaking, like in terms of, you've heard of informative identity, probably, right? Where like the content of the concept is already latent within the concept of self, and it takes time for our minds to kind of analyze it and see what all the entailment relations are between the different kinds of content within the concept. Does that make sense? I don't want to go on if it doesn't. Like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example.
How does it relate to the argument? So,
yeah, so it relates to the argument. So I would say I would agree with you that I start off at just admitting that where I'm at epistemically would agree with what you're saying, with the property being at this point imaginary.
Yep.
That just grant that this property is possibly exemplified, right? The reason why I start there, and this is where my mind goes next. The reason these are the two options my mind presents to me. I don't think it either admits all these things into my ontology, these infinite amount of things, only if these things are possibly exemplified. Or these candidate things that would be admitted into my ontology are impossible. Those are my two options. They're either impossible or possible. That seems pretty obvious. So I feel like whatever candidate you bring up, I'm just going to say, after I have to analyze it first. I'm not going to be like jumping on it right away, but I'll analyze it just to see if it's a good candidate. I would have to see if it's possible or not, which gets into modal epistemology, which is murky. But the difference between all the candidate concepts you bring up that are at that point in the argument imaginary and the God concept is that I've actually done a lot of thinking about the the perfections that are involved in the concept of God, whether it be power, goodness, knowledge, modal perfection, um, uh, other types of perfections that might be implied by other research projects in theology. I'm not sure exactly off the top of my head, but so from my standpoint, it seems like I have more reason to believe in the God. You're saying from your standpoint, you have no good reason to believe that the God concept is any more conceivable than any of the other infinite amount of things that we have no good reason to think are more possible than the God concept, right?
No. So I'm saying that given
No.
your methodology, from your perspective, the existence of these infinitely other things are equally justified. So I'm saying that
Equally justified.
from
Yeah.
as far as I can tell, from the methodology presented in the ontological argument, it leads to the conclusion that all of these things are justified. Not from my perspective,
Yes.
but it seems like if we just grant the ontological argument, that argument itself entails that all these things must be justified.
And you think that that would be an absurdity of the view?
Yes.
I would make a little bit of a nuance. I would say I would be willing to admit these things into my ontology if it doesn't threaten God's aseity.
Okay.
So as long as God's the explanatory ultimate, like I think necessary beings can stand in explanatory relations to a necessary ultimate being, let's just say, whether that be personal or not, that could come up later. But then it's just based on an if-then conditional. Like if you're right about all these other possible entities having to be admitted in my ontology, I'd just be like, okay, that's cool. It'll just be explained by the ultimate necessary being, which would be God. So it wouldn't threaten the ontological argument as it relates to my background beliefs.
Well, that would be the second criticism. So the first criticism is that there becomes infinitely many objects that would all exist, the perfect essence of a pizza, the perfect essence of an island, a bunch of abstract, silly things that we are clearly shouldn't believe in. And in addition to that, there's going to be infinitely many alternatives to the God hypothesis. So God having perfect aseity, because like take some of the other properties of a God, or I know you like deists like to think of them all to be one essence and not different properties, but so just take that term to mean.
I think they're different properties.
Okay, that's cool. So we can take the different properties of God, switch them out, and say, no, this combination of properties has aseity, not this combination. So you asserting that this combination is the one that's the greatest and must have aseity is arbitrary, because I can just say a different combination is the one that has aseity, and created everything in the universe. And that's entailed in the pizza thing. The essence of pizza has aseity, not the essence of God. Therefore, if that's equally as possible, then that would refute the ontological argument, because if there are multiple candidate things that have aseity that are mutually exclusive, then that proves the argument false.
So let's start with let's do with the pizza thing. Let's just do a concrete case then, just to help me out. So the way the intuitions are pumped at the beginning of perfect being theology, it's called, that's the name of the research project. Is it better to be a person than not a person? And then you would say no, because betterness is a made-up property, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So
one second. Thank you for the super chat, Cosmic. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Cosmic. You're the man. That goes to both of us, by the way.
What does B/W mean?
B/W. I'm not sure.
Hi, Tom. Today in B/W question mark.
Say it again. I cut you off.
Hi, Tom, comma, today in B/W question mark.
Today in B/W question mark.
Black and white. Ah, that's it. Black and white.
Black and white. Ah.
Thank you.
Dang it.
Hamanu. Yes, got it. Got it. All right. So you were saying, sorry to interrupt. That was just, I was like,
no. It's totally cool. This is perfect, because I think a lot of people waste time, honestly. I don't interpret these natural theological arguments as like magical, like you're just confronted with just the brilliance of the argument and it overwhelms you rationally and all this stuff. It basically just it takes you to a conclusion. I think the entailment relations are pretty set in stone, maybe. But it says, if you're willing to grant this, then it leads to this. And then do we have really good reason to grant this thing at the beginning and it leads to this? So right there at the very beginning, I'm just going to probably just underline our differences there. I would say it seems to me more like, and this is this methodology is in, there's a really good book. It's called The Cambridge Companion to Philosophical Methodology. There's a bunch of different methods that are discussed in there. And one of the methods that's discussed is by a guy named Nicholas Rescher, and it's called aporia. I don't know if you've heard of this word, aporia.
Yes.
It's from Aristotle. Okay, cool. And what it basically does is it's an appeal to intuitions. And you can actually appropriate empirical methods too when you're adjudicating propositions that can't be all true at the same time and you're doing some kind of cost benefit analysis. But I would just say, do I have more reason to think that being a person is better than not being a person than I do any premise in a philosophical argument leading to the conclusion that would undercut why I would think better is an imaginary property rather than a real property? And you might have a good argument for that, by the way. Just to make an analogy, Louise Anthony has like arguments like this. She's a moral realist, atheist. And this is an approach that's done by like David Enoch and Schaefer Landau and David Parfit and all these. Willenberg does this too. They say
you mentioned that you have more reasons to believe that being a person is better than not being a person, and you didn't list the reasons. So you'd have to give what are the reasons, and if your only reason is you intuitively feel that, well, that would definitely not be a reason to think it is more the case than not the case, because the argument against that, the defeater, is evolution caused you to feel that, therefore it's not true, which is a good defeater for any of those intuition-based beliefs.
Now, so just one at a time, there is no reason, I would say. I think intuition is itself an intellectual seeming. There's different dispositions to believe. Timothy Williamson says this. If I have a reason to prefer my intuitions, I think that would make the research program ultimately intuition guided. And so someone who does not believe that research programs ought to be governed by intuitions primarily, and the intuitions that are shared by the members of that research program are going to be kind of edged out. So I don't have an answer to that. I don't think there are reasons. I'm saying if you don't share my intuition that persons are better than non-persons, it's kind of a non-starter, and you are totally open to that. The next step is, okay, well then what reliability does that method have? Because you can just reject my intuitions and go about your day, and what makes you think you've laid claim on any kind of aspect of reality? This is, unless you had something to add, I was going to take a little bit of a sidebar.
Okay.
What my mind does to get around that, unless you got something.
Sure, go ahead.
Because I literally don't know what I could say in response to that. I look at a person and I look at a rock, and it just seems to me better that a person with the rich imaginative life that comes with being a person, experiences of love and pleasure. And, you could go down the list of what are all the awesome things of being a person, which for every mountain, there's a valley. You're going to suffer a lot of pain. You've suffered from depression. I think you remember bringing it up, which sucks. I have to. But rock just has no mental life, and it seems to me to be better. And then if you back up and you say, okay, well, what's the reason for the reliability of this deliverance of your intuition? I don't have any. It's just completely. I look at the case like Chisholm does with particular cases, and I just say, when I look at the case, it just seems to me intuitive that that's the case, and I have more reason to think that that's the case, that the deliverance of the intuition is the way the intuition is presenting it to me, than I would for whatever it is you said about evolution, which I would like to explore with you, because I think that's important, because you were saying that the evolutionary story would undermine the reliability of the intuition and make it about survival or reproductive fitness rather than about truth or something, maybe.
Yeah. So I'd say that the evolution acts as a defeater in that we all have more reason to believe that those sensations, that a brick is not as good as a pizza with toppings on it. Like if we had the two, I get a feeling that the sausage and pepperoni pizza is better than the brick. But that's just a feeling because I like pizza. So it is not that there's objectively a truth value there to one is greater in the universe than another. It's just evolution has caused me to like this combination of properties more than this combination of properties. And that seems to defeat the conclusion that our sensation that people are better than non-people corresponds to anything outside of our imagination, because it can clearly be fully explained by just something in our imagination due to evolution.
Right. So with the evolutionary story, that I do believe, I don't really think I have a good reason to doubt what the experts are telling us in biology about evolution. It's the add-on that it's that there is nothing guiding the process, I think is the part that I would need to have a metaphysical discussion about. So I would say that with bringing in the evolution thing, I would agree that if it's unguided and it's within the ontological story of naturalism, and it would follow that, yeah, it's just primarily interested in reproductive fitness and preserving the species and all that stuff. And I think the Churchlands actually said that truth takes the hindmost. I think I would agree with that. But then I would say that because when I look at particular cases, like when I look out my window and I see a tree, when I think about morally relevant cases in terms of seeing a gruesome murder or a rape or something, I don't know. And it seems to me that these things are true. What that tells my mind is there's got to be something else going on that a naturalistic kind of version of the evolutionary story is telling me. So I could agree with what the biology, just strictly biology, is telling me. But it's the naturalistic add-on that I think that would be undercut by my seemings. That's about it.
Okay, that seems like to me, when we look at the biological data and we look at all the scientific data, there's no evidence that indicates it's guided by anything. There's nothing in anywhere in science that indicates that. And so until you have more than just your seemings to indicate that's the case, then the conclusion that is justified is that that is not the case.
See, this is another wall I run into. So there's this other issue in metaphilosophy. There's this issue that the metaphilosophers talk about. They talk about this thing called evidence neutrality. I'm not sure what to make of this, but there's certain views of this that seem persuasive to me. It seems to me that what you think is evidence is going to be influenced by what you think philosophy is. So depending on how you conceive of the philosophical project is going to depend on how you conceive of what evidence actually is. And I'm conceiving evidence differently than you. You conceive of evidence in terms of, does it adjudicate between imagination and reality in terms of future novel testable predictions? And I say my research project actually appropriates that. I have no problem with that. I would label myself a methodological particularist or a methodological pluralist. I would say, let's look at the domain we're studying, let's look at the subject matter that we're studying, and then tailor the method that's appropriate to the domain. And I think there's a lot to be said that for the view that there's been a lot of trespassing from pseudoscience and religion onto the domain that the hard sciences are meant to study. I agree with that. And the more that's pushed back against, the more lends credence to an optimistic kind of induction that science is going to take care of everything, right? My research project conceives of that in terms of like an ice sculpture, because I think that there are different kinds of domains that are accessible to different kinds of methods. And to gauge the success of one method by how far it measures up to the success of another method relative to another domain, I think that would be guilty of imposing on that criteria methodological constriction that wouldn't be warranted by the kinds of things that you'd be studying relative to the kind of method you would use to study it.
That's
me,
something.
Seemings are fine relative to some projects, but horrible. Like I wouldn't use my seemings when you look at the sky, it looks like the sun's going around the earth, right? It seems to me to be the case, and that all seemings are defeasible. They can be overturned by scientific progress. Awesome. I love the march of science. I love the progress of science. But I think that there are domains of study that are significantly not like that. They're not making claims about the natural world. They're making claims about something that's not a part of the natural world. And so the methods that are appropriate for that domain seem to me to be appropriate, not empirical methods for non-natural domains.
Sure, I hear that a lot. The fact that the methodology I'm choosing wouldn't apply to this field, this other field. But I think that evades the actual point, because the point here is that we have a method that successfully differentiates imagination from reality. That's science. Now, you present some other field that says, well, this can't be adjudicated by science. Well, okay, that's fine. But that's not evidence it's true. You still need to provide some other methodology that's equivalent to science, that to differentiate imagination from reality to show it's real. Saying that
Right.
science doesn't apply isn't evidence for it being the case. It just means here is a tool that cannot provide evidence for it. So the claim that you need something like science isn't specifically saying you need only science. It's just you need something equivalent to differentiate its imagination from reality. And so it doesn't really address the question to say, well, it's a different domain. Well, you still have to provide something
And
to
I'm willing
act
to
as
admit you're
science.
onto something. I'm trying to follow it. So when you conceptualize evidence, when you understand the concept of evidence relative to this other method that we're going to put on the table, like to say, like, let's try out this method when it comes to this other domain that doesn't overlap with the domain that the empirical methods study. When you're saying that method is not evidence, how are you conceptualizing evidence in that domain?
Anything that can differentiate imagination from reality.
Agreed. I would agree with that. Like when I use my intellectual seemings to look at, like, let's say the wrongness of rape, I would say that it's not merely imaginary, that rape is wrong.
But that wouldn't be evidence, that because that's the only way to verify that is through your seeming. So you would need to be able to test your seemings
But you
against
see what he
something.
did.
What?
But see, this is, I see what you're doing. That's okay. I just can't. It seems like you're gauging the success of my candidate method by how it measures up to how your concept of evidence operates in the domain of the natural world and how your empirical methods operate in relation to the natural world. And I'm saying, no, it's a different method. So the criteria of success for my method is going to be different. But you're saying, it seems like you're disqualifying my method because it's not measuring up to how the method of the sciences succeed.
Well, so
So
it's
it's hard
that,
for me to.
like, if I come up with a new method to discover prime numbers or something, and I say, I shake a magic 8-ball and it
That's
just
bad.
gives me a number and says, this is a prime number. My method is the magic 8-ball. Shake the magic 8-ball and it gives me a prime number. Well,
Yeah.
in order to know it works, you have to independently verify that those are prime numbers. You can't just trust the 8-ball. Say, well, you see it works. You see, I'll shake it and say, gave me a number, so it must work. You're like, no, you have to verify it independently of the 8-ball to confirm that it works. So in order, if you present this new method of your intuition and your seemings, and you say it about something that we can't verify in any other way, that's like shaking the 8-ball and saying the 8-ball works because the 8-ball gave you a number. It's circular. So you would need something else to compare it to know that it works in general. So like if I said I have a new method of 8-ball and I can compare it to science and say if it gives me a prime number, I can test it against math, like, yep, that's a prime number, shake it, yep, that's a prime number, then that's good evidence the 8-ball works. And so now if it gives me something else outside of what math can test, now we have good reason to believe it because it was right in all of the other cases. So in order for you to provide evidence of this new method, you would have to be able to compare its success rate to things we can verify in an independent way, like science. So since we have a successful way called science, we have a big data set that you can try your new method against and say, well, does your new method give us the accurate data in any scientific method, any scientific way? And if it does, then we can start to trust it on the non-scientific ways. But if we have no way to independently verify its success rate other than its own say-so, well, then that's not evidence of it being successful.
I hear what you're saying. I still feel like near the end there, it's hard for me. Let me see if I can repeat back to you what you just said, so I'm understanding what you're saying. Here we have this thing called intuition, which could be Beeler's intellectual seemings, dispositions to believe, Williamson, whatever. And it seems like these are bedrock when it comes to epistemically latching onto the plausibility of certain claims. The reliability of that method of intuition needs to be tested, right?
Yes.
Okay, this is where just so I can follow you here. Tested in what way? Empirically?
In any way that you can differentiate imagination from reality. So it's, if you can test one method and show that it works with a different successful method, that's a confirmation that the method works. So you need to just test it against something else that we think is successful. Empirical science is something we do think is successful. So if you can use your intuitions to indicate the same facts that science indicates, that's a good indication that your intuitions are telling us something about reality.
So let me go with the first half. So the second half, that would be awesome, and that happens all the time. When the domain of philosophy overlaps with science, uh, and science is contradicting philosophical intuitions, the philosophers need to change their intuitions. That part I agree with, big time. It's the first half that I'm having trouble following. So I go to test the intuition, and I either test it by how far it measures up to empirical methods, or I have to somehow demonstrate how that intuition distinguishes imagination from reality. Am I right so far?
Yeah, you just have to like create a new method that is equivalent to science in that it can do that. Yes.
Okay, let me analyze that then. When you say a method equivalent to science, you mean a method equivalent to science in the sense that both methods distinguish imagination from reality.
Yes. Doesn't need to be with novel
Okay.
predictions. It doesn't need to be empirical in
Doesn't
any
need
way. It can do that. It just needs to be
doesn't need to
equivalent
be
in that one
empirical.
sense.
So, I've read a lot of Beeler, I've read a lot of Williamson, I've read a lot of the intuitionists, Michael Huemer, all these people. It seems, see, there it is again. It seems to me that the project of intuition guided projects, it's really hard for me, because I think it's worthwhile to see where you're pointing this research program. It's hard for me to even conceive, let alone imagine, what it would look like to come up with a comparative, a another criteria of success that we could appeal to in order to measure the reliability of the intuitions. It doesn't seem to me that intuition guided projects should be conceptualized that way. So then now the burden, I'm just exploring this out loud. The burden is on me now to demonstrate to you not only why I don't need whatever criteria of success that you
A way to
are
differentiate
asking
imagination from
for.
reality. Why we do not
Yeah.
need a way to do that.
So it seems to me that the Chisholm thing comes up to me again. So it seems to me you're wanting a criteria first to gauge whether or not the particulars that I appeal to satisfy that criteria. And it seems to me that intuition guided research projects start with the particulars. And so the question at the threshold is almost like I trip over the starting line almost, so to speak. I
I would
can't
say not
get
quite.
there.
So I would say
Okay.
that we know for a fact seemings are wrong a lot. They go against science. They get the wrong answer all the time.
Correct.
So we have good reason to trust they don't correspond to reality at all in any
Right.
context ever. So even if you propose a new domain of reality, the likelihood that our intuitions can correspond to that new domain is equally as bad as the fact they can correspond to this domain. There's no reason to think they are more likely to correspond to that other domain than they do the scientific domain. And so simply saying that it's a different domain doesn't provide any evidence of that.
Okay, let me try to explore that then. This is a good argument. So you're saying that, so just go a step at a time, the seemings have been wrong every single time.
Lots of
Is that what you
times, not
said?
every time.
What?
They're right
Okay.
sometimes. People get lucky.
People get lucky, right? Fallibilism kind of thing. But with regard to high level theoretical physics, seemings are worthless. We could agree there, right? Unless you're talking about the seemings of the things in the lab or whatever. I don't know.
I wouldn't say that. So there are seemings even in high level physics. Like Pauli literally just made up a constant because he felt like it and it was right. So there are seemings even in high level physics that are correct. It's just very,
Right.
very unlikely.
Very unlikely, but it was awesome because his intuition was confirmed
Yes.
empirically. And that's why that intuition, that seeming has worth.
Yes.
So this is the way my research program conceptualizes what you just said. It says you are absolutely correct that when it comes to this particular domain of investigating the natural world, if you were to consult your seemings alone without the hope of, future confirmation, like with the Pauli thing, That is horrible. That's a horrible methodology for distinguishing imagination from reality. You need something way more concrete, novel, future testable prediction, which I want to actually talk about that criterion too a little later. But that's a good one to distinguish imagination from reality with regard to that domain. And what you're saying is, because it has sucked this bad in this domain, in the natural world, therefore, application of intuitions when it comes to this proposed, let's just say it's proposed. I won't say it exists yet, but it's just said these people in these different research programs are proposing this other domain that doesn't overlap with the research programs of the hard sciences. You're saying that those seemings are absolutely worthless because of how worthless they have been in guiding research in the hard sciences.
Yes.
Does that still man that pretty good?
Yep.
Okay. Let me unpack this. I don't necessarily see the inference, and the only thing that's making me say that is, again, I can't understand why I should give up on the legitimacy of intuition-guided projects if built into the research program that these intuition-guided projects have, and this gets into actually prediction versus accommodation, but built in, from what I've read, built into these research projects, they say, do not apply these seemings in inappropriate domains. They have that built into the actual research program. And so it actually accounts for what you're saying. And it accounts for it in a way that I agree with. I think that's awesome. I like that. But the only reason I'm going to bring it up is if it's built into the research program, I don't understand how you can make the inference that because it sucks so bad in this domain, it would suck in this other domain if the domain is actually an existent area of methodological research or whatever.
Well, because we know that is what?
Oh, I just said under my breath, I'm just losing me on the inference.
Oh, right. So that doing that is a fallacy we know humans do all the time, specifically in religion and snake doctors and anything they want to do to make it unfalsifiable. Applying that property of saying it doesn't apply to this domain, so don't test it in reality. You gotta trust. You gotta have faith. You gotta have faith in the method. We know that methodology is fallacious. That leads to infinitely many false conclusions. So accepting that methodology is itself, reductio ad absurdum. It leads to absurdity. So we can't accept that method. Just saying.
Would you say it's ad hoc too?
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, it depends.
Would you make a distinction between pseudosciences and non-sciences?
Yes.
I've seen this distinction before. Like I'm sorry, pseudosciences and soft sciences.
Yes.
And how do you conceive of philosophy? Do you think it's a soft science? It's a soft science? You think it's a soft science or humanity? I've seen both.
Yeah, like philosophy.
I agree with both.
Like I'd say philosophy can make things that correspond to reality, like logic, like math, politics, economics, sociology. You can do things that correspond to reality, and so that's perfectly fine. Pseudoscience is things that literally don't correspond to reality, and so that would be the difference.
They don't correspond to reality, and they mimic the language of science to give it the appearance of legitimacy, and it's kind of like snake oil salesmen and stuff like that, right?
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah. So it seems to me that, again, the intuition-guided research projects have that built in as one of the parameters. They agree with the hard sciences that there is this risk of illicitly appropriating scientific methods, to have the appearance of looking scientific to get at these absurd domains. Now, again, I think that I can be a particularist, again, about, homeopathy, astrology, right? Stuff like that. And I can say, yeah, those are ridiculous, right? Because we share background beliefs with regard to astrology, homeopathy. What was the other things you brought up? What are some absurd things?
Dowsing, the chi energy, kai, Reiki, crystal healings.
Crystal healings.
Prayer
These are horrible. These are horrible. it seems to me that there is a difference between those domains and the domain of the particular things that you could discover in any kind of metaphysics book, an introduction to metaphysics, like the nature of time, nature of free will, persistence conditions of individuals, nature of consciousness, all this stuff, which may or may not have to be taken over by the sciences. I'm not sure yet. I think that philosophy of mind needs to take it easy a little bit. I think there needs to be a little more deference to science in those areas. But um, it seems to me that there is a distinction between those domains and the prima facie kind of legitimacy that they have as compared to homeopathy and all those other things that we listed. And so if I have intuition guidance with regard to the ones that seem to me legitimate, as opposed to these other things that you were trying to compare those domains with, I don't know if I could convince you that they're not just like those domains, but I could like reassure you in a kind of meta way that we're aware of how absurd those are, and we think that intuition guided research projects with regard to homeopathy are a waste of time.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's
It seems
definitely
good.
a difference there. One is that, like in metaphysics, they're trying to explain why they think the stuff we see is happening, whereas astrology, they're trying to explain it and then do things in the world with it. So the difference there is that the philosophers in metaphysics admit they have no idea what they're talking about. They're just making stuff up. We don't know. This is what we think it is. And they all think different things. They don't all agree on anything. They're all like, this, no,
Maybe.
this, no, this.
Yeah.
And so they're essentially just making up what they
Yeah.
think possible explanations are. And there isn't any evidence for any of those. You couldn't be like, I like this one better because of this. Like, no, it's just made up. Science will tell you the answer. You don't get to make up a better answer because you think of it. And so that would be the difference, is that like astrology, you could say, if they were trying to explain something but didn't actually make predictions which were testable and weren't literally self-contradictory, then they could be a legitimate metaphysics too. They could say, I think it's caused by Zeus. Zeus does time. Zeus is the time thing. And that would be equally as legitimate as most metaphysics of time, from my perspective.
How dare you? So I guess I just conceptualize the interface between the disciplines a little differently. Like, I do think it's helpful to have a model of interdisciplinary interface. I do. And I do think there's overlapping magisteria between what metaphysics studies and what the hard sciences study, which is like the source of the friction. But it's hard for me to get on board with what you're saying with regard to if there is this non-overlapping subject matter that the metaphysics are studying. I don't see how I can gauge the success of the methods that are appropriate for that, not only the non-overlapping part, but at the different aspects of the overlapping part, even though there are conflicts.
I'm not sure
how
what
to
you
tease
mean.
that out, but no, I'm just thinking out loud. It just seems to me that it makes more sense that you would have a different kind of a method to get at a different kind of a domain, and not to hold the success of that method hostage to either how it satisfies the empirical methods or this Pandora's box kind of objection, where if you open the door to intuition, then you have to let in all these other absurd domains. I think I can avoid both of those options, but without appealing to our criteria. It just, this is the thing, like, it
How?
just seems to me that the whole project, by the method of cases almost, it's just like bring up a case, and I'm not trying to give an argument for the reliability of intuition. I'm just literally just saying, let's look at a case and tell me how your intuitions are exercised by looking at the case. And this is not a case that should be taken over by empirical methods. This is a case that does not overlap with what those methods can study. And it seems to me that it's an extra weird kind of Zeno type objection, like, but with emotion, like you have all these objections from Zeno about the impossibility of motion, but we're moving. It just seems to me I have more reason to think that these cases that I meditate on and the intuitions I use to study the cases that don't overlap with what the empirical methods study are legitimate, as opposed to homeopathy and all that stuff. A new audio device was added. Matt's new earbuds, Bluetooth. later. Sorry, I just had to pop up. My bad.
That was a part of your philosophical argument. The
No,
Bluetooth,
it was trying to override my microphone.
But let me pick up on that for a minute. So I want to. So it would be like, to me, if homeopathy changed slightly. So homeopathy said, you know what, we agree, homeopathy doesn't really work in the scientific realm, but we're going to make up this new spiritual realm. In the spiritual realm, homeopathy does amazing, perfect. It cures all of your key energies. Now, of course, you can't measure this scientifically, but it's a different realm. It's a totally different realm that is totally reliable. So we just look at these particular cases, like this particular case where this one person did homeopathy and their life was just so much better. Therefore, we should totally trust homeopathy works in this completely new ontology of the spiritual key realm, because that's to me is synonymous to what you're saying. You have this methodology which we know fails consistently in the real world. And you're saying, okay, I'm going to make up an entirely new world where it works, and it works really well, and we should trust it. And the reason we should trust it is because there are these particular examples that I feel it worked for the reasons I think it worked.
No, I see what you're saying. I wouldn't call it a different world, though. I would call it a different aspect of the same world.
Those would be synonymous. So in different ontologies,
synonymous, right?
Would make a difference to the argument.
I see what you're saying. I think it depends on the relevant similarity between this homeopathy domain and the domains of metaphysics. So I don't see what the relevant similarity...
One sec. I need to clarify, because it doesn't seem to me it matters what the difference between the domain is. I can make up whatever domain I want, top, down, left, right. It's just making up a new dimension. It doesn't matter what dimension you make up. It doesn't become more plausible if you change the dimension. I don't see why changing the qualities of the dimension make your methodology any more plausible. Like, if I change the homeopathy dimension to a different dimension, is it better now? Well, no, it doesn't matter what dimension I change it to. It's still going to be equally as bad.
I'm more interested in why we both agree that the homeopathy dimension is bad. And I'm really interested in why I can't go on board with, is that my boss, my wife? Sorry. Why I can't go on board with thinking that the homeopathy dimension is just like the domains of the metaphysics that professional philosophers utilize or study, sorry. So I'm agreeing with you that the homeopathy domain is absurd, and that if they were to make up a method to study that domain, an intuition-guided research project to study the homeopathy domain, first I would need to see the details of that, but it seems to me that that would be absurd. And you're saying that that is absurd in the same way that my project is absurd with perfect being theology.
Yes.
Okay. It's because I'm trying to tie it back to the ontological argument. So this is what I would say with that. What if we stay imaginary just for a second at this stage of the argument? Let's just stay imaginary. Let's make the better property imaginary. Is that possible? Can we do that?
Sure.
Like, can we agree on what better might mean?
Sure, we can make up any imaginary definition you want.
Let's make one up and agree on it.
Sure.
So let's do it. Like, what do you like when you see when I say something like a human is better than a rock? What do you think I mean by it? Let's make something up real quick.
Has more qualities.
I know it sounds like a waste of time, but I'm going somewhere with this. I promise.
It has more qualities you like.
Well, that was kind of bad. Yes, I like those properties because typically the way these perfect being theologians will cash out the betterness would be in terms of intrinsic betterness. So it's like it wouldn't have any extrinsic relationship to what I would like or not. It would just be in itself good or better or bad. Now, from your perspective, even intrinsic qualities are imaginary, correct?
Yes.
Moral intrinsic qualities are imaginary, right?
Sure.
Maybe, even though you agree there's the best possible world. At least
I'm trying to just go along with the argument here, trying to get we're going to make up a definition of better we can agree to.
So better, let's agree that better is cashed out in terms of intrinsic betterness.
Okay, so there's an intrinsic betterness property, right?
Okay, let me clear that up too. And I'm sorry to be pedantic and nitpicky. I really apologize. I love you. I don't mean to do this. My mind is annoying. We're not talking about the existence of a property, right? Because I don't agree with the properties existing. I'm a nominalist.
Okay, so what do you mean when you say something is better and it's not a property of the thing? How can it? be better and not be a property of the thing?
Perfect. So there's a huge debate. I'm going to be very, very quick on that. So there's a debate between those people that think that ontology implies truth or truth implies ontology. Okay. So if you say it's true that a certain thing is the case, and the reference of the thing, the word, is an actual property, that the property needs to exist in order for the statement to be true. That's a position. I think Quine actually held that. There's another position where what they do is, if you go to like quantified modal logic or quantified kinds of logic or whatever, where you have to quantify over terms and you have a value and it's bound by the quantifier variable and all this stuff. You can have different interpretations of the quantifier, right? You can just say, there's deflationist theories. You can just say, I'm going to deflate the quantifier and just say, in order for the statement to be true, it doesn't need to have to quantify over existing objects for it to be true. And I think Jody Azuni does this, and it's called a book called Deflating Existential Consequence. Not important. All that's important is that there are views out there where it just says you can have true statements and they don't necessarily have to ontologically commit themselves to what their terms quantify over or the reference of their singular terms. They don't need to actually refer to existing things.
Okay, so what does it mean
And
for
this is what the
something?
anti-Platonists do.
What would it mean for something to be better if it doesn't refer to a property of the thing?
So you just have to come up with a successful paraphrase. So just say, it's better. A way to say that it's better is just to say it exemplifies the property of betterness, but then you just apply a paraphrase of that, which just says,
well, you just said property, you said not a property. So it's not a property. So there's no,
here's the thing.
Nothing in that thing is intrinsically better than that thing. But that is still
false. I'm saying it wrong. It's my fault. It's my fault. You can still make objective truth claims about the betterness relation in terms of the intrinsic stuff. You can say true things about that betterness relation without ontologically committing yourself to the existence of properties.
Yeah, and I'm asking how. How is it the case that there's no property about or in that object that is better than that object, yet it's still better than that object?
Because you can say true things. You can actually appropriate property talk and it make true statements about that thing without ontologically committing yourself to the existence of abstracta called properties. Well, we might be saying the same thing, honestly.
Well, no, I understand that sentence, but I'm asking, how do you do this? How does it mean? What does it mean for something to be better if there's nothing about it that's better?
Oh, here we go. So when you ask for what it means, this is semantics. So pick your semantic theory about betterness. So all this would mean is, okay, let's cash out what we mean by intrinsic betterness.
Well, okay, let me pick up on that real quick. So like if you can just pick whatever you want as a betterness definition, then you could pick the antithesis or an alternative to that, and it would be equally as valid. So there's no way.
Equally as valid, maybe.
What, like, for me, the reason it has to correspond to reality is because if there's like actually a better existing property somewhere, well then yes, that one wins. You don't get to just make up a different. It's just that one's going to be the one that's real. But if the only thing that makes it true is I like this definition of better, therefore this object is better than that object, nothing about that could be true because it's just a subjective definition you've made up. There would have to be some kind of truth maker to make one statement better than another. And that truth maker has to be something.
I don't necessarily endorse truth makers. That's ontologically profligate for me. But I'll stay away from that just for a second.
But we can change the word. What makes the statement true that X is better than Y?
I don't even think that's a correct question. I would say that what makes the statement true, that illicitly presupposes truth makers, and I don't think they exist. I think propositions have truth conditions, but not truth makers. Personally.
Okay, what are the truth conditions that property A is greater than, or object A is greater than or better than object B?
Truth conditions would be it would be better if the thing had it as opposed to not having it. So if you took away the property, it would be less good, intrinsically speaking, not extrinsic to anything else, than it would if you
Okay,
didn't
but
have it.
you can't use the word better when defining better. So I'm asking what conditions make something better than not better?
No, wait, I think I can use the word better in the analysis of it though.
Well, no, because if I'm
Like,
asking what better is and you put better in the analysis, well, then it's circular reasoning. It doesn't give me any
but
content.
yeah, it's hard for me to avoid circularity on certain paradigmatic levels for me anyway. I'll explore that in a second because I think you have a point there. But let me kind of unpack why I'm bumping into a wall here. I think when it comes to explanatory issues, we all have an explanatory ultimate. Otherwise, we're going to have infinite regresses. Do we agree with that? In terms of explanation, we're just going to go back and back and back and back if we can't use the ultimate, the explanatory ultimate
I guess so. Mine would be
in the actual
reality.
explanation. It'd be an aspect of reality. I think that's
Right,
true.
like obviously not like all of reality is the ultimate thing. So yes, some part of reality. There'd be reality, the
Some part
essence of
of
reality.
yeah. But when you latch onto this word better, I think this is like a semantic bedrock thing for me. So there's things called unanalyzable primitives, where you can't analyze it in terms of anything more primitive than the actual thing we're trying to conceptualize. And so when we're at the bottom, like what G.E. Moore says about the good, some people think you can analyze it, in a more primitive way. Others don't, but it's just like an example. Like with betterness, for me, that seems like an unanalyzable primitive to me. I really can't do it. I can't conceive of anything more fundamental. But I
Okay,
think I
how
can
is
get an
that?
inkling of what it means, though, when I say that it's better if the thing had it than if it didn't have it.
Well, so
So
how is that different from
again,
homeopathy or voodoo here? So they say it's an
oh,
unanalyzable principle. It is what it is.
I don't really know a lot about homeopathy, honestly. I really don't. So, like, do you know anything in particular that they believe so I can
Homeopathy
compare it?
is the principle that water has memory, and that if you drink water that has the right memory, it can do stuff in your body.
Right.
But so if they say
Okay.
the essence of homeopathy is something that is fundamental, and I ask, well, how would you show that this water has this memory as opposed to this memory? And they say, oh, well, it's just a part of the memory. Well, and then it's, well, what do you mean by that? And they're like, well, no, it's a primitive. It's a primitive. How is that different?
Oh, it wouldn't be different at all. I don't see why it would be different. But I would dispute whether or not it's a primitive. It seems more obvious to me that betterness would be a primitive than water. But I'd have to dialogue with them to see why
Memory,
they
the
think water
memory
is
of
primitive.
water memory. So it's not the
Memory
water,
of
it's the
water.
memory of water.
Like it seems to me like the concept of memory can be analyzed in terms of concepts that are more primitive. So I would just say the homeopathy guy is just wrong. That it's not a primitive.
Explain that more. So what do you mean by water memory can be analyzed in something other way that
It's
that
hard to say. It's just hard
morality
to say
can't?
because without talking, well, it's hard to say because I'm not talking to that person. But from my own background beliefs, I feel like we can analyze water in more primitive terms, like
Well,
in
it's
terms of its
memory, water memory. So it's a spiritual thing. It's the spiritual aspect of
even
water.
memory,
What?
even memory to me. Memory seems like a conceptually rich kind of concept. It
Okay,
seems
how's
like we
that
can break
different
that
from
down into
good?
more.
What is the difference there?
Now, I'm at bedrock. I don't know. When I go to analyze goodness, and there's precedent in 20th century philosophy for this. When you try to analyze the concept of goodness, people just are like, it's conceptual bedrock. When you try to analyze it in
Well,
terms of something else,
start with the memory. So memory is not conceptual
yeah.
bedrock because.
Well,
Thank you for the super chat, Jacob. Appreciate it. The chair of the sluggard caves and got nothing, while the chair of the diligent richly supplied. Betterist 622. Yes. All right, go ahead.
wait, what's that mean?
We're making up a joke Bible that is using the book of the chair.
How
So we're just
dare
making up
you?
verses. It's Betterist verse
Does that have 66
622 to
books?
23.
Are you gonna have 66 books?
Uh, maybe. So
Or
so
666
so
books? Um,
how is
so memory, yeah. So memory. I mean, this will just depend on how we break down the. So memory seems to me to involve more fundamental concepts like I don't know, it being a mode of cognition, and we can break down what cognition means.
wait?
It
So
can be a
wait.
source of
Let's go with that one.
justification.
So good could be a
Okay.
mode of cognition. So why would that be different here?
So it depends on what you mean by good. It depends on what you mean by mode. It depends on what you mean by cognition. So here's where I think this is where I keep. So let me try and go this way. I see what you're saying. I do. And I do, but I'm trying to tell you that we're still in the realm of imagination. So this is permissible right now because we
Yeah.
haven't even slipped into the actual world yet.
Yeah.
I'm saying that there in the even in imagination, what we can do is fix the reference of our words. We can say, what do you mean by that word?
Sure.
And I can say, here's what I mean by the word. And now I've fixed the sense of it. I've like, I think we both agree that words evolve, the meaning of words evolved. And you'd have to go to the person and say, well, what do you mean by, well, let's take atheism. Like, what do you mean by atheism? What I mean by atheism is just what the majority of people call atheists and ACA and Dawkins and Harris. And I think you were saying that for a little while. And then you go to like William Rowe or Paul Draper, what do you mean by atheism? The SCP definition. And so they're fixing the sense of an identical word, right? And once that sent for me, this is intuitive to me. It seems like once you fix the sense of that word relative to the way you fix that sense, that's what that word means. And we should go with the way that meaning was fixed by the person that's wielding the word or whatever. So I'd have to ask, what do you mean when you specify to me what you mean by mode, what you mean by cognition, and what you mean by memory? Or I guess I was breaking down memory in terms of those concepts.
Right.
It seems like we can fix on a pretty objective.
Water memory is that it saves some property of a previous state and imparts that property onto whatever it is in now. Essentially, that's what we just call that memory.
Okay. So all those concepts, so previous state, past, present state, those also seem to be concepts that aren't primitive. I think I could break all those down a little more. Goodness is one of those.
We're just describing what the water memory does. The water memory is the essence of water, and the essence of water is the primitive. And what it does is that it takes properties of a previous state and transfers it to a future state.
So I would go up to the homeopathy guy and disagree. I would say the essence of water being memory is not primitive. Here's why.
Why?
And then we would dialogue back and forth.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Why? Because my plan is I'm going to mirror what you say and show it's equally the same as better.
Perfect. So this is where I'm going with this. So let's go with the mode of cognition thing. Memory isn't an unanalyzable primitive because I can analyze it in terms of modes of cognition, because there's other modes of cognition. There's
Wait, go back. So the word memory just refers to what we're labeling the essence of water. The essence of water, the magical spiritual essence of water is what we're talking about here. So you need to analyze the magical spiritual essence of water, which we call memory. It's not literally a mental state. It's not a mental state. We just call it memory because it does stuff.
Perfect. So then I would go, what do you mean by water?
What do I mean by water? It's a primitive. The essence of water is a primitive.
It's a primitive. So you don't mean the liquid stuff that scientists study?
Nope, that's just an expression of the essence of water.
That's an expression of the essence of water. If what you mean by water is this, what was your exact words? If what you mean by water is
the spiritual essence that transits previous states to current states.
And all of those string of words, you don't analyze those in any other way?
Well, some of them do, because I described what it is and then what it does. So the what it does part you analyze in different ways. Those are all words that can be broken down into other more primitive things. But the what it is statement, though, the spiritual essence of water, no, those are all primitives. So except because the water there refers to its expression in reality, which can be broken down, but the spiritual essence, that which is inside of those things, can't be.
So when I say that the concept of goodness is a unanalyzable primitive, I'm talking about the concept of goodness, not the thing that exists in the world that the sciences could study or anything like that. So is this essence of water, memory, or whatever, is that a concept of water?
Yes. So we're talking about the concept, the spiritual essence of water is a concept.
Right. So let me go a step at a time. So does that concept have content?
No, it's purely a primitive.
So I would say goodness has content, and content.
Okay, but little change that. Yes, it has content. What's the content?
I want you to mirror it perfectly.
Right.
Mirror it perfectly. So the content of the concept of water is its essence, memory, whatever.
What is the content of goodness here, so I can follow along?
Well, so I can give you the meaning of goodness, but if I try to like in terms of like that's good in terms of particular cases, but when I go to analyze the concept of goodness, I can't analyze it without using the word good again.
Right. So I'd say the same thing about water. The water, I can give you particular molecules of water, but if I try to analyze the concept of the essence of water, you're just going to get more essence of water words.
You're losing me just a tad, right? Because I thought we were identifying water not with the liquid in the world, but with this essence of memory or something.
So there's this thing, the essence memory, which then exists within the water we see. So that's just the place it resides, which is why we call it water memory.
It's doing things that the concept of goodness, I'm having trouble with the mirroring thing. It's doing something that the goodness concept isn't doing. I see what you're doing with the mirroring thing. If the water thing sounds absurd, then so does the goodness one. I get what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's probably my fault. I can't see the similarity between the two because I don't know what the analogical counterpart is with goodness when it comes to actually existing water. Like good state of affairs, maybe. Good states of affairs, like
there'd be like examples like punching a baby. So any moral example, helping an old lady across the street, punching a baby, all those cases would be examples of like moral particulars, and the water is the water particular.
Yeah, so I agree that there are moral particulars, right? Punching the baby and all this stuff, and that's obvious to you, right? But that's bad. Punching the baby. Drowning babies is bad, right?
Maybe.
Maybe you would say it's bad though, right?
Yeah. I'm a moral realist. Yes.
Is it moral realist? And it's not going to matter for what you're doing with the parody thing. I'm not trying to say that. But then when I look at, okay, we have this imaginary homeopathy person that's postulating the existence of. From a particularistic standpoint, it just doesn't seem to have parity for me.
Well, what part doesn't have parity?
Level,
so like, let me walk you through it more. So we have these particular.
Stop you whenever I want though, because sometimes you lose me at the first.
Yeah, that's fine.
So if I go like this, you got to stop.
Say stop or
just
something.
For our both sake, or stop. Okay.
Because I'm only half looking at the screen, but so there's a particular thing we see. Like we see babies drowning, we get the sensation of badness or whatever. And there's a particular thing that the homeopathy person sees, which if they give homeopathic water to a person, they have some change in their life. And so these two events represent the existence of some further primitive concept. In morality, it's the case of this moral goodness stuff, the better stuff. And in the case of homeopathy, it's the case of this spiritual water stuff.
Okay, spiritual water. So just to be clear, what we're putting on the table is that goodness is a unanalyzable primitive in the same way that spiritual memory is a conceptual primitive. So let's analyze that. Let's just, because I don't think Moore was just like, let's just call it a conceptual primitive. Like I think they actually had to analyze why it would be. So let's, I guess, explore. Would you want to explore that right now? Or
yes, because my argument is that the assertion of betterness is just like the assertion of homeopathy, spiritual water, and they're both nonsense. Using this methodology, I agree with. I'm a moral realist, so I think there's a better methodology. But yes.
So you do agree that there is a sense of that might sidetrack us. Actually, let me stay on point. I do want to come back to that though, because I think you agree with me that there is an objective,
moral
sense
realist
that we could. But you wouldn't say that goodness is a conceptual primitive?
No.
You would analyze goodness in terms of something else?
Yeah, it's like literally a law of physics. So I'd say goodness refers to a physical thing.
Oh, right, because you're a moral naturalist, right? Right. And then, so that actually is a part of the dialogue tree. Because there's that whole naturalistic fallacy thing, but I think that begs the question. That's a bad argument, but you wouldn't say that the law of nature is good?
No. Well, would we evaluate it as good? No, I'd say it is the essence of good. Is could mean two things there, but that's a separate topic here. So irrelevant to my view of morality, we could say that using your methodology of saying betterness is a bedrock and the ontological argument framework would also lead to the absurdity, reductio ad absurdum, that homeopathy could use the exact same argument and be equally as justified as your position of goodness. Because it seems like they could do the same thing and say the essence of water is a bedrock that is unanalyzable. And you're saying, no, that is not like betterness. There's a difference here. What is the difference?
It seems to me that they could both be, I guess I just have to talk to the homeopathy person, but I think it's kind of a harmless thesis to mirror me in this
Well,
way.
it's a
Because I
reductio
think
ad
there are other
absurdum.
things that are
So
like,
if
I
your
don't see, yeah, I
methodology,
see what you're saying, but yeah,
so it's like, here's something we know for sure fails in the real world. Homeopathy definitely doesn't work. And
definitely
if
doesn't work. I agree.
your methodology of positing this new ontology and saying, in this new realm, my new posited ontology works just fine, even though it fails everywhere in scientific realm. And it's reasonable to accept this new ontology because it's stated about a different realm. Go ahead. You can just stop. You don't have to raise your hand.
I'm in your house right now, man. Um, so that lost me just a little bit because when you say fail in the real world, it loses me just a little bit because we both agreed that in the real world there are such things as good particulars, right? But you're talking about the
I'm talking
method. You're
about
talking
the
about
methodology, the intuition methodology,
right.
using intuitions, not betterness itself. Like intuitions can be right, like Pauli and the mathematics, but intuitions are mostly wrong. So using intuitions as a basis to come into a
Okay,
justification.
real quick.
Go ahead.
So I was willing. Let's stay in imagination. I want to stay in this imaginary world. I don't even want to get to reality yet.
We were right. I was
Is that
just
okay?
addressing what you previously said. Like you weren't seeing the difference between homeopathy
particular
and
things.
betterment, or you weren't seeing the similarity. You weren't seeing how I was trying to parody the argument. And
I guess what I'm saying is I'd be willing to listen to the homeopathy person and listen to how they're fixing the senses of their concepts. And
okay.
if they have unanalyzable primitives in some of the concepts that they use, okay. I don't know. I don't think that would for the parody to go through. I think where we need to go next is how they're fixing the senses of their words is going to overlap with being ontologically committed to something in the actual world.
I don't know what that means.
Well, the way I'm going to fix the concept of like perfection when it comes to like the concept of God, how, like if you ask me, we're in imagination right now, what do you mean by perfection? What are you talking about? Okay, let's not go to the real world yet. Sciences aren't going to help us here. Let's just stay in our imaginations. Imagination's awesome. I love imagination.
Okay.
There seems to me to be, and there it is again. There's intuitions.
It's
We're in
fine.
imagination, so it's okay. It seems to me that there are different kinds of perfections that something could have, such that if they didn't have it, it would be less perfect than it would be if they did have it. It just seems to me to be the case. Like a person's is better than a rock.
Yeah.
A conscious person's better than a non-conscious person in terms of that particular mode of cognition. It seems to me that a good person is better than an evil person. It seems to me that a powerful person is better than an impotent person. It seems to me that a person that knows more is better than a person that doesn't know more. It seems to me that a person that has these properties necessarily is better than a person that has these things contingently. There's the key thing. Now, here's the thing. This is not a proof. I agree with planning. It's not a proof. At the very least, I think it will get to rational acceptability, like what Plantinga says, nature of necessity. It's saying basically, this is why I compared it with this criterion of ontological commitment that Quine had. It didn't, that criterion didn't tell you what exists. It tells you what you're committed to if you hold on to particular scientific theories.
Right. So I agree with all of that. None of that is addressing my criticism. So my criticism here is if we accept the methodology you're presenting, the methodology leads to absurdities like that homeopathy is equally as justified in everything you're saying. And so I want to pick something that is stupid and silly and that we can both accept as wrong. And if that thing is justified by your methodology, then we should both agree your methodology is garbage. So
maybe.
What, maybe? Did you say maybe?
Well, I'm not prepared to give up the argument just yet. So
there's one question. So if your methodology equally justified the reality of homeopathy.
The reality of it.
Yes.
Right.
So like if using your argumentation worked equally well to justify homeopathy as it does your belief system,
homeopathy sucks. Yeah, agreed.
Then your methodology is bad because it shouldn't
If
be
that
able.
method
It should be able to
correct.
differentiate stupid things from not stupid things.
Real things from not real things.
Yeah.
All not real things are stupid. Not all not real things are stupid, but
Harry Potter is awesome. Shut up.
Harry Potter's amazing.
So,
Sauron's awesome.
But you agree with that part. If I can successfully show that your methodology can't differentiate ridiculous things from non-ridiculous things, then
Yes.
it's equally not a good methodology to accept because it would indicate that yours is probably one of the ridiculous things or could be one of the ridiculous things, and there's no way for you to tell the difference.
And that's a good thing to say too, because empirically we do know homeopathy sucks.
Yes.
So if my method leads to some that the empirical methods have actually demonstrated to be not the case and stupid, yeah, that method would be stupid.
Right.
But all hangs on that conditional.
Yes.
Right. Everything hangs on that conditional. So at this point, we would just have to have a really pedantic conversation with our imaginary homeopathy person. So let's skip right to the interesting property, like the maximal greatness thing. Let me just see how my intuitions react to this real quick. So we agree, we're still in imagination.
Right.
And we're talking about the magical essence of water.
Yep.
Right. So we said magical, I gotta write this down, I keep forgetting it. And you're gonna say that this magical essence of water is good. Morally good.
No.
Right, to mirror it, because that's what I said about the perfect being. Right.
Yeah, so I'm going to say that.
I made it sound absurd.
Well, because I'm trying to mirror goodness, so I'm trying to say something that isn't goodness can equally be justified as goodness. So it needs to be different. Yeah, it needs to be analogous, but not goodness. So it's not goodness. It's just it's water.
It's not goodness.
So I can't.
That would help you because that sounds really weird.
So the point here is that we can say this about any combination of made up properties, other than the ones you're positing, and have them be equally justified. So I can't use the ones you're positing like goodness. I have to use something else.
Oh, okay. So, but the property has to sound retarded, right? Like snuffleupagus, the Cheeto-ness or whatever you were saying.
Magical water spiritualness, yes.
Magical water spiritualness. Now, I can tell a story about how I'm understanding the concept of goodness, and then when I ask you, what's this concept of what it was Cheeto-ness? Then you're going to have an explanation ready for me, right? You're going to say.
Well, once I know so first I need to know what you think is a plausible explanation, what works as a justification. And then once I understand what works as a justification, I can make a mirror that seems to do the same thing. But right now, I don't think anything would work. So I have no idea what you think would work here.
Let me try this, actually. Let me try this. Mirror this. Let me scroll down here because I was actually thinking about this. What is the symmetry breaker here? So would we agree that there are existing research projects that analyze the concept of goodness and how it plays a role in not just meta ethics, but normative ethics, applied ethics, and perfect being theology?
Are there people who study it? Yes, just like homeopathy.
Right, and the people that study it are members of a research program, right?
Yes.
Now you said there are people that are members of research programs that study homeopathy, right?
Yes.
And there's a Flat Earth Society, all that stuff.
Yes.
And what universities hire these people?
What difference does that make?
Okay, so this is a defeasible intuition. It seems to me that if a university dedicates a particular department to an area of study, it's lending it a certain degree of legitimacy that it wouldn't otherwise lend to. I love these faces; these are great. I like that.
Theology is a thing taught in colleges. It is garbage.
Well, it depends on the context, though, right? Like, so there is a theology department.
Feminist gender studies is a thing taught in colleges. Critical race theory is a thing taught in colleges. Colleges are stupid. Art history, stupid.
You're absolutely correct. You're totally correct. It depends on, like, for me, it depends on the context in which those departments are admitted into their curriculum.
But I just want to clarify. So it seems like you're saying that the difference here between homeopathy
I might be
and
giving it up. That's actually a good objection.
okay,
I might be giving that up. But just hear me out though.
sure.
Like, do you think that there is a distinction with a difference that can be made by intelligent men, like what Buckley says in his debate with Chomsky, between like the metaphysics department and what they do and the precedent that they have at the university in the Western world, and how what everyone admits to be pseudosciences, right? Like homeopathy and astrology. Like, it just seems, as a particularistic way of looking at it, just seems to me to be different and have different degrees of legitimacy.
Right. There's lots of differences. They're not the same, but this case is the same. So this methodology that you're proposing is the same with both. It's not the only thing. There's lots of other differences, but this one is the same.
The homeopathy one is the same?
The methodology you're presenting in order to justify the ontological argument and goodness could be adopted by those people. They obviously don't think about it to this degree, but it would work for both. So this methodology would be the same. Right. Now, it's not the only thing. This wouldn't be saying the entire field of philosophy and metaphysics is equivalent to homeopathy. This is just saying this one aspect of the field of metaphysics, this ontological goodness, ground-making intuition thingy, is the same in both. They use their intuitions, you use your intuitions, and they both think they're justified. Philosophers just have more words to say that they're justified.
Maybe. That sounds deflationary. There's another thing I'm getting hung up on. Even within the realm of metaphysics and philosophy, you have clashes between different philosophers that believe different things that are both members of the research program that are guided by their intuitions, right?
So did you also do in homeopathy and in Harry Potter fans?
Oh, right. That's fine. I'm gonna zoom into the philosophy part just real quick. Would you say it's impossible for the people just within that particular domain to have knowledge of anything because of the fact that their intuitions are clashing?
Depends on how you define
that they're studying.
Depends on how you define knowledge. In that case, I would say that there is no way to adjudicate which one is right. They're all just making shit up.
And the reason why there's no way to adjudicate, let me say it like this, a good indicator for the fact that there's no way of adjudicating who is right or wrong is persistent disagreement in the field.
No, I wouldn't say that.
Lack of consensus in the field.
That would be better.
Persistent lack of consensus in the field.
Maybe.
Like no consensus on the big problems, like what Chalmers talks about in why isn't there more progress in philosophy? He's like, it's been like 2,500 years and we're still unsettled about the big questions. That's ridiculous.
I mean, I like consensus. Consensus is good. I like empirical evidence better, but yeah, I mean, consensus is definitely better than disagreement. So the fact there's disagreement doesn't matter. There's disagreement in climate science, but there's consensus. So consensus is more reliable in climate science.
But
so we can go with that.
And a lack of consensus.
What?
But disagreement and lack of consensus. Do you think that implies lack of knowledge?
Lack of, again, it depends on what you mean by knowledge here. I think that
like you're a fallibilist, right?
Yep.
But you supplement fallibilism with other things, right?
Supplement it? I don't know what that means.
Like you could be like a fallibilist, and every fallibilist should appropriate this method of novel future testable predictions or something like that. Or else you'd have to say fallibilists can use intuitions. I don't think you want to say that, right?
They can. I mean, I'm fine with that. I just think that the better method is one that gives you a better correspondence to reality, and the one that I think does that is novel testable predictions.
Right, but if you can be a fallibilist and be guided by intuitions...
Well, you can be a fallibilist and say you're guided by a magic 8-ball. You can be a fallibilist. Fallibilism just means you don't require certainty. So you can say God told me so and be a fallibilist. The problem is like which method is more reliable. I think the novel testable predictions is more reliable.
Right. And then the criteria of success that we have to appeal to measure what's more or less reliable appeals back to the way empirical methods work for me.
Sort of. Yeah, I would say that I don't go that far down. I say that we all accept science works. So that we accept science works. And so science is
That's an interesting question, actually.
Are you looking at the TV screen right now? Science works.
Technological progress is amazing. I love it. There's actually other questions that I would want to parse out with you.
All right, it doesn't
about
necessarily
nature,
mean it works
science,
at
and all that.
everything. It just means it works in some cases. So we have some correspondence to reality with science. And so science gives us a reliable data set that we can test any other method with. So if you want to propose any other method, you can say, well, if this method works, it should be able to get the same answers science does in some level of domain. Something about something.
That's where I kind of, that's where it loses me just a little bit. I feel like you're holding these other methods, the success of these other methods, hostage to whether or not they meet the tribunal of the way the empirical methods are successful. And I don't see a reason to go along with that.
Because you need
other than the reductio that you provided. That might
that's
be
a pretty good reason.
But it seems like it's like I've heard Dillahunty. I'm not comparing it to Dillahunty. I've heard Dillahunty say this. It's just like, if you have another method, give me another method.
Yep.
And then you put another method on the table, and it's like, well, that method doesn't have the virtues that the empirical methods have. It's just like, well, you asked for another method. So I'm wondering what criteria of success you have in mind when we put the other methods on the table. It's murky to me, because I feel like this intuition guided method has a lot of virtues. It doesn't have a lot of the virtues that empirical methods have. Don't get me wrong. Empirical methods are awesome, but it doesn't land me in the reductio, I don't think. Like, I think I can ignore the homeopathy people and still say I have knowledge. And I think you would say that too, in the face of persistent disagreement and lack of consensus. And
I don't follow that. So I don't see why you can dismiss the homeopathy people. To me, it seems like your methodology and theirs are exactly the same in this case, and so they're both equally justified. I don't see why one is better than the other. And the only reason you'd said that they do is because there are academic philosophers.
Let me supplement it. Yeah, let me supplement it a little bit. So, I'm thinking out loud. So I would say that primarily it is intuition based, but then we have intuition guided explorations of the entailment relations of particular intuitions. So I could go up to the homeopathy person and just say, let's assume that your view is correct, and elicit a contradiction, like what you're trying to do to me. Like you're saying, like, if we assume that your method is correct, we run into this absurdity that all this other crap is admitted into our ontology, even stupid crap.
Yep.
It seems to me that could overlap with empirical methods if we have to empirically verify one of the premises in the reductio. But I feel, and I can't do this off the top of my head, but I feel like we could get arguments that every step of the way would be a priori, and we would just be able to draw out the entailment relations. Perfect. So a method that's intuition guided, and I think the ontological argument could overlap with this, because it's just like, assume goodness isn't the way I'm fixing the sense in this case, then this would follow, or whatever. I'll get to that in a sec. It seems to me like you could engage in apparatic type cost-benefit analyses with assuming certain things to be false and drawing out their implications and eliciting a contradiction, and then affirming the thing that you were denying for the sake of reductio. You could do that, and that's all a priori, doesn't overlap with empirical methods, and it seems to me to be better because it's not probabilistic, it's necessary. If we find out through reductio that something's impossible, it's necessarily impossible, which would be awesome knowledge to have, I think.
Reductio doesn't mean it shows anything's impossible. It just shows that if we accept its conclusion, it leads to absurd things. So, like,
that's one version, and then another version, it'll elicit a contradiction.
Right, and I'm just showing that if it shows any ridiculous thing can get equal justification, not that it has a literal contradiction.
Yeah.
So,
and would you agree though?
About what?
I'm cutting you off unintentionally, by the way. I'm sorry.
Agree about what?
That whether or not we call something absurdity will harken back to our intuitions about what's absurd.
Indirectly, yes.
So it is intuition based at its core, right?
Yeah, but that doesn't make a difference here. Reductio. So, because we both accept.
I thought you were liking reductio. Sorry. Okay.
Well, we both accept science works. So science works and describes reality. So if we wanted to say everything grounds in intuition, that's fine. We can say, here's a set of intuitions that work. Scientific ones. They work. Now, if we have intuitions, we're going to apply them in something else. We have to show that those new classes. Oh, go ahead.
When you say scientific intuitions, are you talking about like the Pauli things?
No, I'm just literally saying empirical science. I'm just saying it's grounded in intuitions because you said it's all grounded in some kind of intuitions. We're just going to say literally empirical science is just intuitions. We'll say that for the sake of the argument.
Sorry. Okay.
So empirical science is a kind of intuitions, the empirical intuitions, whatever. And we both agree empirical intuitions work. And you're saying, well, we have these new kind of intuitions that apply to this metaphysical realm of non-empirical stuff. I'm like, okay. If we have this new kind of intuitions, well, the homeopathers also say they have this new kind of intuitions too that applies to this homeopathy magical stuff realm. And the way we assess whether these new kinds of intuitions actually correspond to anything is we have to show, do they actually work in the scientific realm? Can they actually verify the things with the trustworthy intuitions? Can the new intuition realm correspond to the trustworthy intuition realm? Go ahead.
I wanted to quibble with that one thing you said. I think what you said is true. If the claims of homeopathy or the perfect being theology research program overlap with what the empirical methods have access to and could correct if the a priori methods clashed with the empirical methods. But
that wouldn't make a difference in the argument here. So remember,
okay, perfect.
Remember my argument was that homeopathers claim that this magical spiritual stuff is a whole new realm, and even though it completely fails in science in every way, it's a completely new a new realm that's completely separate from science. So so even if they said that, it's still ridiculous, and if the method still justifies them, it's still a bad method. So it doesn't matter if it overlaps with science or not. The problem here is what I mentioned earlier,
so that conditional, that conditional, it all hinges on that conditional. If they can do that and that stuff follows and their intuitions are successfully linking them to this magical domain, then what I'm doing is ridiculous. And actually the whole project of intuition guided projects should crumble to the ground, right? Except for the sciences that overlap with empirically accessible domains.
That would be overly broad. So not all intuitions, just the ones that don't have a way to independently be verified through things like science. And there could be other methods. Again, science doesn't need to be the only method. It's just the only one I know about that works.
That's where it loses me. It's like there could be other methods.
Sure.
But the proposed methods that we put on the table
work for all of the nonsense. So if your method works for all of the nonsense, it's not a good method. It has to be able to filter out the nonsense. So like if I propose a new method of the magic 8-ball method, you shake the magic 8-ball, it tells you something.
That's a bad one. Yeah.
I like the magic 8-ball method. So the magic 8-ball method, shake the magic 8-ball, it tells you something, and like the lotto numbers, and you win the lotto. That's a good method. It works. It's a very good method.
That would be awesome.
And so now that method can differentiate itself from homeopathy. Homeopathy can't win the lottery. So if you can do something that can differentiate your model from all of the ridiculous models that can say literally the same thing you're saying, that's a good method. But if it can't, then it's a bad method, because it's the fallacy of unfalsifiability, that every single different hypothesis people come up with, they want to make sure that you can't prove it wrong. And so in order to do that, they make it ambiguous. So in order to make a good method, you have to be able to filter out the bad methods in some way. It has to be some concrete way to filter out the bad methods. And that's what you haven't provided in your analogy. You haven't shown a way to filter out the homeopathy method. Everything you've presented, I've seemed to be able to parody, except the fact that some philosophers in academic schools teach one and not the other, which doesn't seem to be a good argument. So everything else seems to be mirrored. And so your method doesn't seem to be able to meet up to the standard to be able to filter out the ridiculous stuff.
Right. Okay. Yeah. It needs to filter out the ridiculous stuff. So I'm still getting hung up on a couple things. I don't see the parity with the stuff that perfect being theology is studying with what the homeopathy people are studying, even in the imaginary realm. Like if we're just stuck in imagination, it just seems to me that the domain of goodness and power and knowledge and
let's walk through that for a second. So you have an asserted thing. I'd call it a property. You don't have to call it a property. There's an asserted thing of goodness or betterness. And the homeopathers have an asserted thing called the magic water property. So that's the parity here. So you have it in your imagination, you have asserted a thing that is a primitive.
And I gotta make it a property that, let's use property talk.
All right.
And I'm gonna make it a property that if this being that we're analyzing has it, it's better than if he didn't have it. I'll just say he, pronoun he, who cares? that's what I mean, right? I'm still
Sure.
an imagination. And then when I go to the homeopathy person, what's the parallel with that one?
Okay,
If
say that
they
again.
have the magical water thing,
Say that again.
so with goodness, it's what I mean by that is that being is better if they have the property in a morally relevant way, like in terms of maximizing the virtues or something. Inform that with any kind of metaethical theory or something, then it would be without the property. And this property would be like having that property to a maximal degree. So there's more or less, there's intuitions about states of affairs or persons being more or less good or more or less bad. Like punching a baby doesn't seem as bad as what's going on in Ukraine right now or something like that, maybe.
Okay, and so I would just parody that by saying, what we mean by water spiritualness is the spiritualness that's in the water.
But mine is a like if you go to like a first order predicate logic, it's like a relation thing. So there's like two things going on. Like,
Oh wait,
is there a
I
betterness
didn't follow that.
relation?
So to me, it sounded like just a perfect circle. You just said the same thing on both things with different words that are exactly synonyms.
Agreed. I did that. I just wanted to parody it properly.
Well, no. Your example of goodness, what you said, what betterness is, when you said it, it
Right.
represents something that makes something better. I forget the exact terms. It sounded like an
What
exact
what
circle.
goodness is?
Yes,
What
what
goodness
goodness
is?
is something that makes
Yeah,
something better under some condition or whatever. That sounded like circular reasoning. You
morally
just
better.
used the same words in a different order or a synonym of the same
Well,
words.
I'm not even making an argument. I'm just telling
Right,
you what I mean by
right,
goodness.
right. So if you say what I mean by the goodness and just give more words that mean the same thing, that's the exact same thing as me
Yes.
saying by the spiritual water, I mean watery spiritualness.
But then for it to be a perfect parody, wouldn't you have to say that the essence would be better if it had the watery
No,
spiritualness than if it didn't have it?
no, it doesn't have
Because
any.
what I'm
There's no
saying
betterness.
about
There's no betterness relation here. Betterness is your made up property, and so my parody is that there's
agreed.
a different property that has nothing to do with goodness.
Okay, so it's not a strict one for one comparison between the property I'm making up and the property
Well, that would just make it the
homeopathy
same
person's.
property. So, ah, but
Picasso.
all right. So the parody here is that you say there is this quality of betterness or goodness, greatness, whatever,
Goodness, yeah.
and something makes something more good if it has a betterness. If it would be better if it had this quality.
Yes.
Oh, okay, and so I'd say the parody is that there is this spiritual waterness property, and what makes something spiritual water is if it has more of the spiritual waterness property.
Perfect. If it has more of it, oh crap. Can you hear
Yep.
me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Perfect. If it has more of it, it's better than it would be if it didn't have more of
No,
it.
not better. It's just more spiritually water. So it's not better. Spiritually water. If it's like if something has more water in it, it's a higher quality of water. So if something has more
Higher
spiritual water,
quality.
it's more spiritually water.
Okay. Okay. So okay, so that's perfect. So then that's your parody for goodness. And then
Yes.
we'll just skip over power, knowledge, and just say we can make up two more. All
Yeah.
right, here's the key one is the parody for this water is so awesome that it has another quality which makes it has the watery essence necessarily rather than contingently. Would that be a good parody for what I'm doing with the modal perfection with regard to perfect
Maybe.
being theology?
I would just
Because
I would get rid of better because better is again too is it's not a parody anymore. It's just using your same language. I just say it has the necessary water property. There's no better in this property. It's a necessary water property. The spiritual essence of water is necessarily there. No betterness.
it's necessarily there. Can I explain why I'm bringing up
Sure.
betterness? Betterness is like replete. I guess you're saying it doesn't matter. If perfect being theology is using betterness, it doesn't matter
Yeah.
because we're all just imagination. Okay, so I don't now I'm having trouble seeing a perfect one for one parody.
Okay. So I'm
I'm
parodying the word property better can equate or be
okay,
replaced by literally anything else. Water.
and you're replacing it with higher quality, right?
Yes. Yeah, more of yes. Higher quality. Sure.
More of, and the reason why you say that you can literally replace it with anything else is because it's made up in our
Yes.
imaginations, right?
Yep.
Okay, so let me combat that real quick. So I agree with you that we're making this up right now in our imaginations. I agree with that. But I'm fixing the sense of my words in a certain way.
Right.
In the way I'm doing this perfect being theology kind of stuff. Like
Right.
I have a way I'm making up
Is
the
that
word
a
better.
difference? Is that a difference? Because the water cases too, it's saying watery spiritual stuff is a greater quality or amount. So it's also doing that.
Greater quality or amount. So if it's doing the same thing, you don't want to just use the word better for simplicity's sake?
Well, the point is
I
that,
don't even think it would help me at all.
well, the point is that you can do it with a different word. So the point is to say you don't need the better word. You can just use a different word because they're both made up. So a different gradient of some kind.
Okay, so let me try this point. So Harry Potter's made up, right?
Yep.
Sauron's made up.
Yep.
Right? But Sauron's not Harry Potter.
Yep.
So there are true and false things we can say relative to how we're fixing the sense of the proper names in fictional worlds.
Sure. And
Right.
I'm saying you're talking about Harry Potter better than I'm talking about Sauron, and they're both made up.
They're both made up, agreed. But if you were to do a one-to-one kind of thing between Harry Potter and Sauron, and it's a perfect one-to-one thing, and I don't know, let's just say Harry Potter is a better magician if he can lift up a castle with his mind. And then you were to parody that with Sauron and just say Sauron is a better Dark Lord if he can, I don't know, snuff Frodo out of existence,
Sure.
or something like that. Right?
Sure.
It seems to me that even though both of those scenarios are completely fictional, that we're using language in a certain way where we have to fix what we mean by better,
Right.
even if we're in an imaginary world.
Right. But the problem is I'm saying better itself is the property
Well,
you do not need. Better itself is the Frodo. Better itself is the Harry Potter. Better itself is the Sauron.
Okay.
So you can't use better in both because it's literally the opposite of the thing I'm trying to show, or one of the things I'm trying to show doesn't exist. So it'd be like if I'm trying to parody Harry Potter and I use Harry Potter, well, that's not a parody. I'm just using Harry Potter. So if you're saying there's this goodness property and goodness is a measure of a combination of things that make something better or whatever, that's the parody. Both of those things are the parody, not just one of them, both of them. So I'm saying that there is this spiritual watery essence thing, and what makes it spiritually water essence is a purity measure. And the purity measure is a parody of the better, and the watery essence is the measure of the goodness.
Right. Okay, and then to make up something about how it would be more pure if it were necessary.
More pure.
Or did I just say it?
I don't know if I need that part. So that part I don't think is required for me to mirror in the argument.
Okay.
So
I
agree. I think I see your point now. So yes, I'm not mirroring the highest quality equals necessary. I haven't mirrored that part in the argument yet because I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's necessary in the argument. So I'm saying that the necessary property is just another thing I can add on. So I'm just going to call it necessary. It doesn't need to have the relation that its amount of pureness is required to be necessary. That's a different thing. I just don't think you need. I can just leave that out and still have an equivalent argument.
I don't think it's a perfect parody at that point, just because.
Well, right. I agree. I agree. It's not because I don't need it. It still equally is justified with or without that parody.
That might be, I think, the crux between us then.
Well, I
think that's the crux.
Wait, I can make it that way one way or the other. Point is, it doesn't matter. So the question here is one of these more justified to believe than the other? You're saying that yours has this.
Yeah, they're both imaginary.
Right.
So no, I would say no. They're both at that point in the argument purely fictional.
Right. So the question here is the whole point of the reason the parody argument is trying to demonstrate is that your methodology can't differentiate a ridiculous example from a real example. And so if you would have to say that the example where necessity results from the amount of betterness is somehow less ridiculous than it just having the necessary property with it not being a result of betterness or a result of purity. It's just a thing in it. So I don't see a difference between those two cases. You'd have to make the argument that because the necessity doesn't result from the amount of betterness, that makes it a less plausible parody. I don't think it is. It doesn't seem in any way that makes it less plausible that it just is necessary. It exists in all possible worlds, not because it's better, just because it's part of its nature or something. I don't need it to be a result of its purity doesn't seem to make it any less plausible.
Result of its purity. So you just think it's a part of its nature to be
Well,
maximally pure without
so
any kind of
what I'm
modal
specifically
add-on.
asking is that you would need to make an argument of why necessity being a result of betterness or the amount of betterness is a more
Oh,
plausible thing than just believing it's a part of the nature. Because to me, I don't see any difference between the two.
so yeah, so okay, so at that point, that move that I would make would again be intuition guided. So I guess let me just play it out, and I know your objection to intuitions, but let me just kind of when I think about the metaphysics of modality, that's definitely like a textbook Exhibit A kind of research program that's intuition guided. The metaphysics of modality.
And modality is just about
Um,
relations. So how does that make one more like if I say it's just a part of its nature, not because it's betterness? What difference does that make?
you kind of lost me just a little bit. Sorry.
So I'm not seeing the difference between you saying because it's necessary because it has the most betterness and it just is necessary. Like why would one be more
Oh,
plausible
oh,
than the
oh.
other?
Well, see, okay. So our conceptual schemes are clashing. I'm having to translate in my mind. So be patient with me here. Your question is, why can't this, uh, say it one more time? This is my
Why
fault,
is it
probably. I'm trying
more
to follow this.
plausible or why is it a better
Right.
hypothesis to say that something is necessary because it is the maximal betterness rather than just saying some alternative necessary that just is necessary. There's no betterness involved. Just is that way.
Well, I wouldn't say, first, let me just kind of be clear on this in the order of explanation. I wouldn't say it's uh, how should I put this? It's not necessary because it's better. It's better because it's necessary.
Okay, and so I'm saying why is that the case? Why is there a
Yes.
relation between necessary and better? Why is that
Yes.
important and not arbitrary? And I can just say there's a relation between there isn't one. It just is necessary. There's no need for a relation between better and necessary. You can just say it's necessary. Get rid of the relation altogether.
The relation altogether. That something could just be brutally necessary.
Yeah. Then why would that be
And
less plausible
right.
than saying there's a relation between betterness
I
and
think it's
necessary?
consistent. I think brute necessity is consistent with what I'm saying. If we're understanding brute necessity in the same way, how do you understand it? How do you understand brute necessity?
Well, I'm happy to accept it in whatever you want to accept it, but the point here is that
Okay.
if it's the same, then the parity argument holds, even though it's not using the same betterness relation to the necessity.
So the way you're putting brute necessity on the table, you're saying that however it is we're understanding it, it's getting rid of this move that I'm trying to make, where it's saying that having this property makes the being better if it had it as opposed to not having it. Just saying that the thing is necessary. Just say that instead of saying the stupid betterness stuff. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Sort of, not exactly. So I'm saying that in this quality, you have this entailment between goodness is the amount of betterness qualities in a thing, and the maximum amount of that leads to necessity. And I'm saying, whatever, fine. Mine has necessity. The water, the spiritual water stuff has necessity, but it's not. There's no relation to its amount of purity. That's just they're different things. They're just different qualities in the same thing, and it doesn't seem like one of these is better than the other just because there's a relation between them. So by necessity, I
So
just mean
I'm mad at
exists.
myself right now.
So,
It's
so
hard to
necessity, I just
understand
mean
this.
exists in all possible worlds. So I don't mean anything more than it
Me
exists
too.
in all
Yeah, me
possible
too.
worlds. So there's no better
Me too.
relation
Okay.
there. It doesn't. It's not a. There's no one is greater than the other. That is completely irrelevant. There's none of that in the waterness argument. So the spiritual water is necessary, meaning it exists in all possible worlds. It has nothing to do with betterness, nothing to do with greaterness
Nothing to
whatsoever.
do with betterness.
And
So
just
let me ask you this:
another
if
one,
it
one second,
did,
just to finish.
yeah,
Another
yeah,
unrelated fact that has nothing to do with the necessary part is that it's spiritually
okay,
water stuff. That's just
spiritually
what it
water
is.
stuff. Okay. Oh crap! What was I going to ask? Oh, oh crap! I just forgot it. Would you agree that if, oh, there's my dad. Would you agree that if necessity was a perfection or a property or a good making property, if it was, that the ontological argument would go through?
I think that's begging the question. That's just obviously like if water is water, then is it water? Of course.
Okay, so this is what I'm saying. So um, this is what I was getting at with the ontological commitment thing. I have really strong modal intuitions that existing necessarily is better than existing contingently in my perfect being thing, not in the water thing.
Sure.
And you're denying that the thing that I'm saying is in my perfect being thing is in your water thing.
Yep.
But that would seem to me to give me a reason for there being a symmetry breaker there for why the water thing doesn't spill out into the actual world.
Okay,
Because
so it seems like the only difference there is that you have an intuition that necessity
yes,
is a result of betterness. Necessity is better than contingency, and I could say the homeopathy
yes,
people just have intuition that betterness has nothing to do with it. It's just the water thing is the water thing.
the water thing is the water thing.
Just replacing it with some other intuition they have about the
So if there's like a perfect, like perfect being theology, there's a perfect water theology or whatever you want to call it.
sure.
I think the members of those two groups would be looking at each other with incredulous stares, like, how are you getting to the necessary property? You're just kind of stipulating it.
Yep. So it seems
And
like they have an
then you
intuition
would
that
say,
yeah. So it looks like they have an
right,
intuition the necessary property is X. They have an intuition the necessary property is Y. There's no evidence of either of these things. There's no evidence of any necessary property. They're all just making shit up.
that part, yeah, we're both in imagination. I'm trying to like look at, agreed. I see what you're saying. Um, but it seems to me perfect being theology. This is what's happening. What do you mean by a perfect being? Like, let's say somebody asked me that. What do I mean by it? I'm going to make some stuff up right now that are in alignment with my intuitions, which we agree is an unreliable method for reality at this stage. And I get to that point where I get to modal perfections, an intuition you do not share. You don't share that intuition at all. I have it. A lot of people that I've talked to over the years, this is anecdotal. I'm not going to use this as evidential at all. If I ask them if you exist necessarily, that would be better than just existing contingently, right? And they just kind of say there probably should be a full paper survey on this, right? um, it just seems like if you grant that, and you think intuitions are a guide to knowledge on a case by case basis, not in scientific investigation. That's stupid. Standard particle model particle physics. Ugh. You need actual experimental confirmation. But with stuff like goodness and power and other a priori kind of explorations, conceptual investigations, it seems to me that intuitions, when it comes to just being precise about what you mean by concept, intuitions seem to me to be pretty reliable, defeasible, but on the whole, pretty reliable. And they should be put on the table for discussion like what we're doing right now. And it talks. Now, the parody. Let me see if I can do something with the parody. What I would say to the homeopathy people is that if you don't see this necessity property as a great making property, as a property that it would be better for water to have than not to have, then we're not doing the same project. And if we're not doing the same project, I don't think you can deploy the ontological argument the way I am with the perfect being, the way you are with the water.
I don't think that addresses the criticism here. So the criticism
Dang it.
here is that you've made up a set of qualities and you're using your
Correct.
made up set of qualities to reinforce other made up set of qualities, and someone else can just do the same thing. There's no way to adjudicate which made up set of properties is more reasonable than a different made up set of properties. That's the problem here. So if your entire methodology is circular in that you've made up a set of properties to justify a different set of properties, and someone else could just do the same thing and just adopt one of your properties and change it a bit or whatever, then their new definition of necessary is equally as justified as your definition of necessary. So why would your definition of necessary be equal to theirs? Because the point here is that these are mutually exclusive definitions of necessary. One is right, one is wrong. And
Okay.
so
We
if
both mean the same thing by it.
well, no, because remember, there's no betterness in the water one. Remember?
just this necessity itself, we both agree it's all possible worlds. We're in all possible worlds, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just no betterness. The betterness part isn't there. It exists in
Yeah,
all possible
I
worlds.
think it's a modal perfection to exist necessarily. They don't have nothing to do with that. They
Right.
don't care about it being a modal perfection. Okay. So then it all comes down to whether or not it's true that it's a modal perfection, that necessity is better than contingency.
Right. It's comes down to who is
And then
correct. Which one corresponds to reality,
Right.
your definition or theirs?
Right. Well, corresponds to reality. So let me unpack that for a second. So I'm still in imagination. Nothing corresponds to reality yet. You're just asking me what I mean by certain terms. Right? We agree there, right?
Right, but that part is, we can both agree that analytic statements are just analytic. But the point here is that the reason why your method fails is because when we try to bring it to reality, everything works. All of the reductio ad absurdums work. So in imaginary land, all imaginary things work, and they're all equivalent in imaginary land. That's one part of the argument. That's the validity side of the argument. Is it a valid argument? Yes, it's a valid argument. Now, my criticism, the reason your argument fails, it's valid. I agree. Your argument is valid. The ontological argument is a valid argument. But when you try to go to the soundness side, that's where it fails, because the same method can be used by all of the most ridiculous ideas anyone can come up with. They'll all be equally as valid. They'll all work equally as well on the imaginary side. And there's no way to tell the difference on the soundness side between yours and those ridiculous ideas, which means epistemically they're equivalent. You have an equivalently ridiculous idea.
I hear it. Yeah. So I hear this. I think we're on the same page there. I'm confused of how to proceed with regard to where I'm getting hung up on, though, because it seems like I'm irritating myself right now, because it seems like every time I bring up something that I'm hung up on, it ends up being irrelevant. It's like I can't pay attention. So I'm still confused about a couple things. Like, I get what you're saying about they're both being an imagination. I get what you're saying about the fact that if they both use the same method, you get the God thing and all the absurd crap. And so I need to somehow unpack what it is about this method that doesn't lead to the absurd crap, and it leads to the God of the ontological argument.
Yes.
Did I got that right?
Yes.
Okay. So you agree. So let me go step by step here. How long have I been on here?
Oh, must have lost connection there for a second. It says 20 minutes on my thing. So we've been going since 4, so 2 hours.
It seems to me that we've been going on for 20 minutes. That's it. This conversation's awesome. What was I going to say?
Your job is to differentiate how your method can weed out all of the silly things and lead to the God thing.
Yeah. So what I do is, I go to other arguments in like the history of philosophy where intuition's used, and in the context where people will have intuition clashes, but yet we have like a kind of perspective on what's going on there, where I've been a member of certain groups that use certain intuitions, arguing with other groups with battling intuitions. And either what happens is they don't really have an intuition, that it's actually just a remote application of an intuition we all agree with. I won't get into that. That's pedantic. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that we have a genuine intuition clash. I guess at that point, if the intuitions clash and our intuitions are supporting conclusions that are not just contrary, but contradictory, right? If, let's just say for the sake of argument, if the God of the ontological argument exists, then the essence of water can't exist, or something like that. And the homeopathy people are using an intuition-guided research project. The perfect being theology folks are using an intuition-guided research project. The content of their intuitions are different. Their intuitions are latching onto water and essence and, I guess, property, memory, greater quality than, or purity, I think you said, purity. And our intuitions are latching onto power, goodness, knowledge, and necessity. We agree that the intuitions are just defeasible, right? We agree with that.
I guess.
We're on the same page with that. Intuitions are always defeasible.
Sure.
And yet intuitions can be a source of justification,
Sure.
right? Intuitions can even be a source of knowledge, right?
Depends on how you define
Up
knowledge, but
until,
yes.
yeah, so that's another, let's just leave that hanging in the background.
Yeah.
So let's agree, yeah, so intuitions are a source of knowledge. And then we have to approach philosophical like conversations about particular philosophical problems on a case by case basis where intuitions are being used and there's no appeal to anything empirical to adjudicate anything. And we see that it seems to me when I look at different kinds of conversations in the history of philosophy and different problems of philosophy, either today or in the history or whatever, does it strike you as some conversations having more plausibility than others, or are they all equally implausible because they're not able to be empirically adjudicated?
I don't know what my personal feelings are on that topic.
Like, would like a conversation in like the 19th century about the nature of I don't know, superiority of utilitarianism over deontological ethics, intuition-driven kind of thought experiments have more plausibility to you than, let's say, Hegelian idealism and whether or not Schopenhauer was right about Hegel and all that highfalutin crap.
Well, sort of. I'd say that the utilitarianism conversation is more coherent in that they're expressing their terms more clearly.
Conceptual clarity, that's good. And then, but they would all use like the method of cases, thought experiments, a priori type
Sure.
methods. And that intuition driven, those two intuition driven research programs clashing, it has more that conversation has more plausibility than Schopenhauer's critique of Hegel's
I wouldn't say that
idealism.
because I can't understand the Hegel, Schopenhauer, Kierkegaard conversations, Heidegger. They don't make sense. So it's possible that they could have truth value to them. I don't know, but it's
But
less.
initially, just prima facie,
What?
just prima facie, just that first look.
Yeah, they're both equally.
Looks really weird.
Yeah, the only difference between the two is the coherence of the statements, as far as I can tell.
The coherence of them.
Yeah.
But for all you know, the Hegel Schopenhauer thing could be coherent. You haven't dig that far yet.
Yeah, I don't know.
But that seems to motivate intuition. Like some intuition-driven kind of philosophical conversations could have more plausibility than others. And so this particular philosophical conversation between the homeopathy people and the perfect being theology people has a certain degree of plausibility that wouldn't be had by Schopenhauer and Hegel. The comparison I'm trying to make is the comparison between the ethics thing I just brought up in Hegel and Schopenhauer, and then the research project of homeopathy and the perfect being theology kind of. I agree, we're both making stuff up, but the way we're fixing the senses of our concepts, it seems like they're latching onto things that, for me anyway, cohere a lot better with a lot of people's intuit. Not to make an argument about populum, I'm not trying to do that, but it just seems like for there to be weight for the preferences of some intuitions over others, they like a lot of people have to share them, and it seems like the thing is kind of this pocket of craziness, whereas there's a lot of people that agree with goodness and power, knowledge, and necessity. If you broke it down to them, I guess. I don't know. That's kind of where my mind's going, but I think I agree with you. There's no definitive thing. This is what I was saying at the beginning. Like if you're not persuaded, this is how I would appropriate that. Like if you're not persuaded by their research program, Perfect Being Theology, I don't think that the ontological argument is for you. I think arguments need to be tailored to whatever it is that the person is either methodologically open to or is interested in. Because if you have like a methodological kind of block towards the success of whatever it is that an argument depends on, like that's the superstructure is basically this entire research program that you have these methodological quibbles with. I think the next step would just have these kinds of overall metaphilosophical methodological type conversations instead of just diving. I don't like how a lot of people do natural theology now. I just don't like it because it does leave a lot open in the background. It really does. It's just like you're assuming a certain way philosophy should be done. You're assuming a certain conception of what philosophy is and what it's for. You're assuming the entire way of doing philosophy and how it can latch onto reality. And then you're kind of leaving that in the background, not specifying exactly what's going on in the background, just saying whatever begins to exist as a cause, the universe begins to exist for the universe as a cause. Here's some teleology, here's some ontology, and it doesn't like zoom out and take into account all that other crap. But I feel like that stuff is like the most important stuff. What stinks is, because I have a kind of a like a back and forth relationship with doctrinal philosophy, it's called. Yeah, there's a guy named Richard Double. He's got a book called Metaphilosophy and Free Will. He thinks that the choice between different metaphilosophies is unfortunately subjective, so it's irrational. And I want there to be some kind of normative way to choose among metaphilosophies, and I don't know what that is, to be completely honest. I really don't. I lean towards doing philosophy a certain way that's guided by my intuitions, but I don't have a hard and fast symmetry breaker like what you got with the empirical method. So just to put all my cards on the table, I tend to just decide with my intuitions, but I hear what you're saying about how it can lead to other people using their intuitions. I just think that then, is that really an intuition you have? Let's examine that. Let's see what's going into that. Like, why do you have that intuition? Is it really an intuition? It's like it's a complicated, weird argument that needs to be had at that point. And I don't know. I don't think these arguments are going to be really got to the bottom of anytime soon, because there's just too much going on in the background, metaphilosophically speaking, in my opinion. But like, what was was that a Phil Papers survey question? Metaphilosophy, was it like naturalism was a metaphilosophy?
I don't know. I don't remember. I think naturalism was.
I think it wasn't
on the top.
2020.
I know scientific realism was on the top.
Yeah. There's a lot of other stuff that we could talk about, honestly. I don't really have that much time left.
Yeah. We should do that thing you suggested, do a show together once every 2 weeks or whatever.
Wouldn't that be fun?
Sure.
Like, how would you want to work that out? Like do you want to just like look at neutral things together, or do you want to like interact with other people together, or just have like a Christian perspective in the background maybe, or
I was thinking leave it up,
how we
like
clash and bring other stuff
essentially kind of let you decide on that one, because it'd be more interesting that way instead of doing the stuff I normally do. So like kind of leave it up to you, like surprise me, I guess.
That'd be
we
cool.
can do watch a show together, do a review together, whatever.
What is it? I'm trying to think. Could we combine our names? Because I have a J in my name. Maybe put the M up top above the J and make it a cross.
What is it?
I don't know, but this is fun. I want to pick your brain, see what was irritating. You irritated me a lot at first, and what's really annoying is that once you actually dig beneath the kind of combative way you get across points, I'm seeing your view represented by intellectual heavyweights in the literature that I read. I'm like, oh well, dang it, it's not as absurd as I thought. It's like I've said this on Twitter before. It's like when the heel comes out with WE, like he's just kind of mean, but he could be right, like Dr. House kind of thing. You know, Dr. House. He's like nobody likes him, but then like I'm not saying nobody likes him. I'm just saying, like when I'm just admitting it. I'm just like, this guy is annoying me. What the heck? But then like you go to like try to refute you, and he's just like, wait a minute. Like there's some heavyweight 20th century philosophers that actually back up what he's saying. He's talking about studies, and I'm looking at the studies, and I'm like, well, dang it, this isn't as easy as I thought. What's going on here? But I think there's gridlock there. But I think it'd be profitable to have a discussion, a meta-philosophical discussion. I don't like really good book to get. I would say Cambridge Companion to Philosophical Methodology. Nicholas Rescher has a lot of books on metaphilosophy. There's some stuff from Timothy Williamson on metaphilosophy. Richard Double. That's what interests me lately. And then you have people like Peter Van Inwagen who say like, oh, I don't explain things. I'm not in the business of explanation. I leave that to police detectives and scientists. We describe things. Now that's kind of an opaque distinction to me a little bit, because he also adheres to certain versions of Quine's indispensability argument in terms of what he's ontologically committed to. He gets at distinguishing reality and imagination that way, in a weird kind of neo-Quinean way. It's hard to pin down. But it's just like, but the entire project of natural theology is inference to the best explanation. So what does Van Inwagen think about the project of natural theology? And he's a Christian. So cool we could get him on the show, honestly, because I actually heard him on Discord one time.
Yeah, I invited him on. He declined, unfortunately.
Oh, he did?
Yep.
Some of you saw some of your videos. I don't know. Some people will get rubbed the wrong way.
Well, I invited him a long time ago. That was back when I was debating like Josh, like the first time. So that was a while ago.
That was hilarious. Like I've heard a lot of your stuff. It's funny.
Yep. Do you have thoughts on inference to the best explanation? Do you have thoughts on inference is to the best explanation is affirming the consequent?
I think well, inference to the best explanation. I just looked at. I think the hypothetical deduction is affirming the consequent, right? It's saying if I'd have to actually look that up. I don't think it would be affirming the consequent because isn't inference to the best explanation abduction?
Yeah, and abduction
you have to
is affirming the consequent.
Oh, if you put it in an if-then conditional, if this particular thing goes through. Yeah. I've seen that a bunch of times. I've seen that in the context of actually abductive strategies that try to show the resurrection of Jesus. I'll admit that would be affirming the consequent, but it wouldn't be a big deal because it's not an argument which has a conclusion that necessarily follows from the premises. I forget what the word is for it, but just supposed to lend credence to it. What I do get mixed up in
strength and cogency.
Cogency, that would be a property of a successful inductive argument. Yeah. Where I get mixed up, have you read the SCP article on abduction?
A long time ago. I haven't gone through that in a long time.
I have trouble interpreting certain parts of that article because in some parts of that article, it'll say something along the lines of the fact that something is the best. Let's get out the possibility of it being like the best of bad explanations or whatever, and it's actually a good explanation. That you actually don't have to prove the existence of the explanation first. Like the success of the abduction is actually confirmation theoretic, it said, which would be interesting because I always thought it would be an undercutting defeater for every single abductive strategy you could appropriate in the context of natural theology. If you have to prove the existence of God first for it to be an actual candidate explanation in the abduction, so you could appeal to it as being the best one. Well, it seems like there's parts.
Do you mean prove or just provide evidence for? Because obviously, if you had to prove it, there'd be no point. But
provide evidence for.
Okay.
Yeah. That it being the best explanation just by itself is confirmation theoretic. That's his words. Like that is in itself is what provides evidence for why that candidate explanation is doing the work that it's doing.
Yeah, there's in the philosophical literature, the way they establish evidence is very minimal. So like Bayesian epistemology, pretty much anything is evidence for it. If it's just a logical possibility, it's evidence for it. And the way I use the term evidence is much stricter. Like it has to be the thing that is most indicated by the evidence, something like that, not just could be explained by the explanation. And so when I use evidence in that way, when I say something like in abduction, it wouldn't count as evidence until there was some other independent verifiable evidence for it. That's because if all of the evidences all indicate something else to a greater extent than the God or whatever, and nothing indicates the God, nothing is best explained by the God, then it doesn't, then saying that one thing could be evidence of a God, even though it's evidence of other things more so, then it wouldn't actually indicate the God. You'd be rationally concluding the other things. That's why I say it's not evidence of a God, it's evidence of the other things. The horse, not the unicorn.
Yeah, exactly. I see what you're saying. So it has to like the relationship between the evidence and whatever it is evidence for has to be kind of like intimately tied to this one thing, and it can't mutually support all these other things.
Well, it can mutually support lots of things, but it has to mostly indicate one or the other. So like saying if
I guess that makes sense.
A gold brick is on my table, if we're using Bayesian epistemology, that's a 0.0001% evidence of a leprechaun, but it's like 90% evidence that I own a gold brick or I bought a gold brick or whatever. And so you couldn't say that's evidence of a leprechaun because it's so much significantly higher evidence of the fact I went and bought a gold brick. That's the distinction I'm making here, is that when you say something is evidence for in the Bayesian sense, it applies just literally to anything that could logically possibly explain the data. Whereas I'm saying it only counts as evidence for things that are like of the top 10% or whatever.
Do you understand? Do you have a good grasp of Bayesian epistemology?
Somewhat, yes.
You know, I got halfway through the SCP article and my brain started hurting. To be completely honest, I've seen the kind of way, the fundamental way it's set up.
Did you read Swinburne's book, The Existence of God, where he went through it and explained it?
Yeah, and he'll utilize that simple way. That way I can follow. I like that way. But there's like so many different permutations of this thing. It's just like people, like Like if you look at the bibliography in the SCP article, these are people that have been working on this stuff for 50 years. It's like, come on, man, go play some backgammon. This is bad.
Well,
It's
yeah.
just like, how are
So
we confidently appropriating these methods? And I've just kind of casually, it's just that stuff's hard for me to fully comprehend.
yeah, my
To be completely
problem
honest.
with Bayesian epistemology is because it's so complicated. It's easy to buttress in a bunch of fallacies without making it hard to notice them. So like one of the things is the problem of the priors is the one I've noticed is used the
Yes.
most, where they put in a bunch of
Yes.
the dubious claims as priors that they say are really likely, even though no one else thinks they're likely, like God-related claims, and because they assume
right.
those things are likely and put it in the priors, it makes the probability it could be explained by a God much higher. So like the leprechaun example, if you had a prior probability of leprechauns of like 80% or something, then if you see a gold brick on the table, you're much more reasonable to conclude it was a leprechaun because there's a huge prior of leprechauns.
Subjective
and I think
probability, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the biggest problem here is that there needs to be you have to include the evidence for the fact that this thing is a prior into
That's
the
what
claim
Igor
that you're
says,
making.
by the way.
What?
Igor says that. He says for Bayesian probability assessments, he was like, a good way to set the priors is to supplement it by IBE type inferences. And so you can kind of buttress some sort of semblance of objectivity to the priors by appeal to these explanatory virtues, whatever. Oh, is there a chat button?
Chat button?
There's a chat button. Are they making fun of me in there? These jerks.
Yeah, I'm talking to, I don't know how to pronounce the name, Terrar Dialgello. He's a big ASMR artist I follow on my ASMR YouTube channel because I do a lot of ASMR stuff.
Oh, I don't see any chat.
On my on my YouTube. This whereby isn't connected to YouTube.
Oh, so. Right. Got you. My bad. Do they like me, or am I annoying to them? Am I evading everything?
Well, I mean, I think you're middle of the road mostly. Like Darth Dawkins is people they scream at and hate, but you're more middle of the road, so it's not like I don't think they hate you.
So the more hardcore people are going to think I'm lukewarm and get them out of here.
But I think that's, from my understanding of Bayesian epistemology, that's the problem I have with it, is that if you use Bayesian epistemology correctly and you include, like, if you get the priors correct, it's fine, but that entire process is so easy to scam that you shouldn't do that, and you should include the things, you should get rid of the priors and use the priors as parts of the actual equation. Like, instead of making them priors, take the priors out and put that equation as a part of the evidence on its own.
So you're saying take out background knowledge, because background knowledge is like almost relative to what you think you know, and it might not even be real knowledge.
Yeah. And so because that's where a lot of the bad arguments are hidden, is in the priors. You just put a bunch of bad arguments in the priors, you get whatever you want. Garbage in, garbage out.
The probability, just work with the probability of the theory on the evidence and then multiply that by the probability that you would have the evidence you would have if the theory were true, and kind of like elicit the calculations that way, maybe, because I'm not sure what I would divide at that point, but
well, sort of. I would say that there are a lot of the only things that you can legitimately keep as priors would be empirical evidence. I'd say if it's not empirical, you can't use it as a prior, and you got to show the actual work for it. So I'd say using empirical evidence, scientific evidence as a prior is fine. Like if I said, I saw a dog, what is the evidence I saw a dog? You can use the existence of dogs as a prior. If I said I saw a unicorn, you could not use the existence of unicorns as a prior. You'd have to actually show that first. And that's where what you said earlier, where you need that other independent way of verifying evidence of a God before you used him as a conclusion of an abductive argument. I'd say it's more like to use him as a prior, you would need that independent evidence.
And that you could use Bayesian type calculations maybe within an in-group. Because
if we all accept leprechauns exist, we're going to use that as a high prior. So within our group, here's the probability.
Right, exactly. Subjective probability. Yeah. I see what you're saying. I do. It's hard for me to get rid of. These intuitions. They're really entrenched, and I know you can tell an evolutionary story for why they might be entrenched, but it's just I just have to think it through. It's hard. It's hard stuff. It's stuff I'll be thinking about for the rest of my life, honestly.
Yep.
We're trying to get this right, and we're all members of different ways of going about finding truth. We're trying to prune each other and all that stuff. But I was going to ask you: have you read anything on in the SCP about predictivism versus accommodation?
Yes, I did research that. Not from the SCP. I was reading books on that. I don't remember.
Like
what it was
Lipton,
though.
maybe. What is it, Peter Lipton?
That sounds familiar,
Um,
but
is there a Philip Paper survey question on that?
no. But
Because
that
that's a
was one.
huge
So I was
debate.
talking with Luke Barnes about that, and I was reading
Okay.
about Einstein's theory of general relativity and the predictions it made compared to the accommodation of the perihelion of Mercury. And
Yes.
Luke said that they were equivalently used as justification for the
Some think
theory.
this, right?
And
Yeah.
that when I was reaching that, that was dubious. There's some people who accepted that, and a lot of people who said no.
Right.
Um, it was coincidental. It was like people were already expecting it to succeed, and so the fact that it got the confirmation of just the explaining the perihelion very well was enough to convince
Right.
them. Even though it wasn't satisfactory from an epistemic standpoint, you would still need the testable predictions. But because they were expecting that, they were just happy to accept it at that point. Because like, yeah, we're going to get on the bandwagon because we're definitely going in the right
Right,
direction.
exactly. Like
And
they did
so,
all the hard work. They were courageous. They made the prediction. They put their careers on the line or whatever. And then this other, I guess, research program's just like, look, that is awesome. Thank you so much for all the work that you did. But our theory already kind of predicts that, like over here. We didn't
yep,
see it before, but there it is. And we're not drawing the bullseye around the arrow that you shot, but our theory already had that bullseye right there. And we didn't miss it. Thank you for pointing that out to me.
yeah, yeah. And when I was researching that, there was a really interesting thing is that in the Nobel Prize winners, the people who win the Nobel Prizes are always the one who do the experimental confirmations, never the theoretical people. The
I think
theoretical
that's
people
good.
don't win shit, except like
Right.
what's his name? Higgs boson guy. The Higgs boson guy was like a partial. He didn't win it. He didn't. I don't think he won it. He was like a partial recognition of the guys who actually did win it, or something along those lines. It seems like
Was
the
that the guy that
experimental
actually
data.
just said it was going to happen because of the math he did?
Yeah, yeah. He made the prediction in 1970. The actual Nobel Prize was awarded like
Which is amazing.
5-10 years ago or
That's
something.
amazing. How
And
can you still like? How could like? Are you a realist?
yes, scientific realist.
How could you not be a realist? You know what I mean?
We're
That
in
is
the
insanely
Matrix.
awesome. That the
Everything is
guy,
mind.
yeah, I know,
Everything is just pure
simulation.
mind.
So that is amazing. I wonder what I don't know if you ever read Bas van Frossen. He's I don't know a non-realist of some sort. I guess you get the no miracles argument, but like that right there is really really good evidence for realism to me. That's insane. That the guy could just go in his office, in his armchair, work out some math problems, and be correct.
Well, the ironic thing about that.
That's insane.
Well, the ironic thing about that is, imagine if someone could do that all the time. Imagine if every one of their predictions was correct. That would actually seem to be evidence that it's all a product of their mind.
Oh, right, right, right. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So a little jab at my intuition guided projects.
Yep.
So from my standpoint, ontological arguments, just like the Higgs boson thing, it's amazing. Can't be empirically confirmed though. I don't know. I feel like it just depends. There's a whole bunch of other stuff you could bring up in terms of like Christian theology, but I don't know. I think I predict that we'll hug it out in the afterlife. Wink.
So you're going to be in hell with me because I reject God? Is that what's going to happen here?
It's more complicated than that, man. I think you'll be good.
It's like your prediction
You
is
won't
that
be
you will
doing a
become
lot
an
of things
atheist
you're
and we
doing
will
right
both
now
burn
to
in
make
hell.
yourself happy, right? Oh, there are no blondes. No more
Uh,
blondes.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
have to give up blondes. Blondes were actually a shadow of the better thing that you got. I
I'm
know
looking
it's
forward to date
inconceivable
Lucifer.
right now.
Lucifer's supposed to be super sexy. I'm going to meet him. It's going to be awesome.
What else is there? Oh, you probably like this book a lot, actually. It's the big, thick book.
The world of imagination. Yep. Yeah. So is it just the Blackwell Companion to Natural Theology, just with a different cover?
That is Roman and Littlefield or
No.
Littlefield.
Have you read the Blackwell Companion to Natural Theology, the 500-page book of all the best arguments by like all the big theologians?
Yeah, it came out in 09, yeah.
So if you take the cover of that book and just put it over the natural theology, perfect. We're done.
Oh,
We're done.
imagination. What a jerk. How dare you? What's going on with you? Let's see, what else? Let me see. Oh, I wanted to bring up something else too. Just kick me off though if you're losing time. I remember what you were saying about, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this. You'll say, like when people bring up the laws of logic, right? Um, There
What about them?
is, and you'll say, well, logic is just a formal language,
Yes.
right? That's all it is, and it's used to describe reality.
Yep.
And it's just a language we made up, just like tree. And you got that crap out there that has leaves on it. We use this word tree to describe that crap out there.
How dare you
And
insult
same
trees?
thing. I saw another article which might overlap more with what they're trying to say. There's another article called Logic and Ontology by Thomas Hofweber. Have you seen that one?
No, but I have heard of the ontology of logic and relations being real.
Now, one of those senses of the logic is the formal language thing. Let me see if I can bring that up. But independent of whether or not they're right, I just wanted to see your thoughts on this. This was, wow, 04, 2017. Okay, good. So yeah, they have formal languages, areas of overlap. There we go. Different conceptions of logic. They have a study of artificial formal languages, is what you're saying. Study of formally valid inferences and logical consequences. Yeah. Study of logical truths. Okay. Whatever. This L4 thing, the study of the general features or form of judgments. So I'm like, what's that mean? So then when he compares, and this is L4, by the way, he's comparing L4 with, you go down here with the ontology section, and there's also 4 things for ontology. One is study of ontological commitment. Oops, minimize that. Study of what there is, that's fine. The study of the most general features of what there is, how things are related to each other in their most metaphysically general ways. And then there's O4, study of mental ontology, saying what the task is of ontology. So when I go down to L4 related to O4, here we go. This is where I think they're getting it. Control F. All right. Okay, so, and I see your option here, actually. It's kind of interesting. Now, okay, one way to understand logic is as the study of the most general forms of thought or judgment, what we called L4. One way to understand ontology is as the study of the most general features of what there is, our O3. Now, there's a striking similarity between the most general forms of thought and the most general features of what there is. Take one example. Many thoughts have a subject of which they predicate something. What does that sound like? Haven't you heard this a million times? The one of the many.
Yeah.
The predication, this phenomenon predicate, are subject predicate forms of our sentences. They got to correspond to like properties and substrates in the real world. And there's this mirroring relationship between the way we use the language and the structure of the world or whatever. And then it says this. What there is contains individuals that have properties. It seems that there is a kind of correspondence between thought and reality. The form of the thought corresponds to the structure of a fact in the world, and similarly for other forms and structures. Does this matching between thought and the world ask for a substantial philosophical explanation? Is it a deep philosophical puzzle? To take the simplest example, the form of our subject-predicate thoughts corresponds perfectly to the subject of object-property facts. If there is an explanation of this correspondence to be given, it seems it could go in one of 3 ways. And here's okay, wait. This is one way. Either the form of thought explains the structure of reality, that's idealism, or the other way around, a form of realism where the structure of reality explains our forms of thought. Or maybe there's a common explanation of why there is a correspondence between them. For example, on a form of theism where God guarantees a match. I think that's the heart of what precepts are trying to say. I really do, with the logic stuff. Now, whether or not that's plausible, I have no idea, but it looks like it's an option. And the fact that they don't say this is annoying because it always just goes to impossibility of the contrary. It's like, what content is that? That sounds ridiculous. And it seems like they're doing this project. I think Van Til had this project, I guess, where he's trying to explain the correspondence between the forms of thought and the forms of the reality. And whether or not that project gets off the ground or succeeds, I have no idea. But it seems like that's what they're trying to do.
Well, yeah, but they're making a strong argument that saying the other 2 are impossible, that the third case is the only one.
Yeah, that's the roadmap. So they could be wrong in their whole project, but it looks like Hofweber's saying that it's a project that exists. But it's irritating to me that that's not made explicit, I guess. I don't know.
Well, actually, I think they would probably go with the first one, that thought instantiates reality and it's God's thought. They probably wouldn't Because I don't think if you tried to actually explain to them the difference between 1 and 3, they wouldn't be able to get it. So I think that they would probably say that more in an idealistic sense, that you need a mind to ground logic in order for anything to have any kind of logical relation.
Maybe, because I mean, I would agree with that, but I'm not an idealist. So I would opt for 3 in a sense, but just not in the kind of strict Van Tillian sense. Maybe. I don't know. I have to think that out.
Because I think 3, a better example of 3 is to say that there is this essence of logic. Logic exists as an abstract object, like a Platonic object, and it is the one that corresponds between the two, the mind expression and the reality expression of logic. I think that would be a better example of 3.
That would be, yeah, that would be an example of 3. Like you saying, another example of 3 is the God one. And then the abstractness of God, people can duke out, maybe.
Yeah.
Let me see. Let me see here. Oh, I got some Phil Paper survey questions. Do you think that the consensus of this survey is functioning the same way consensuses work in scientific consensuses?
No, it's just a shorthand. It's just something I can use to slap precepts in the face.
Slap precepts in the face. I'm looking at, yeah. So it looks like Bourget and Chalmers, and I read this last night, so you probably know more about this than me.
They're the ones who did the study,
saying
right?
that you can actually, what is it?
They did the study. They're the ones who did the Phil surveys, probably the first one.
Exactly, yeah. 2009 and 2020. Yeah. It sounds like what they're saying is that you could use this could have evidential value in the same way that the sciences do, if philosophy converged towards the truth on the big questions. And because they don't, we can't use it in the same way consensus operates in the sciences. I guess Chalmers is saying, built into the system, I guess there will never ever be large scale convergence towards the truth, at least on the big questions. Maybe the little questions, the negative, knowledge isn't justified, true belief, or conditional claims or something like that, or things aren't the case. We can make progress on that, but just not progress on the huge things.
Yeah, essentially, I think the only purpose of the Phil surveys paper is to show that some ideas that are taken seriously in Discord and other online realms are not taken seriously in academic philosophy, and you can use that as a way to insult them and call them stupid for taking silly ideas. And that's really mostly the purpose.
I would bite the bullet. I'd bite the bullet. It's like, yeah, sorry, man. You know what I find very unfortunate? Why was this sent to 7,685 philosophers and only 1,785 completed the survey? That is outrageous.
I email philosophers all the time to come on my show, and I can correspond that is about the appropriate respondent rate.
Is it? It's just that people need to, they don't need to, okay, there needs to be a 2030 survey where people are forced to take this survey. Take away people's freedoms for one day.
Yes.
I want to see it. All right, so there's that. Just want to get your thoughts on that. Oh. Oh, we actually talked about that. Survey was good. Permissivism. Let me see. Oh, can I talk about your moral theory, which I find very interesting?
All right.
This isn't you're making a prediction about this thing, so it's not actually distinguishing between imagination and reality, right? You're saying like in the future, maybe. Is that what I think I heard you say that a couple times?
So I make predictions, so it should be able to in the future. It's trying to do that.
Right. It's trying to do that, and it's not, and it doesn't matter. Like, do you think you can see like a trend for it converging on something into the future, or do you think the bell curve is just kind of unreliable when we look at it within the next like?
Yes, I think it is converging on the best possible worlds model.
You're saying that society is edging toward a like a singularity type moment where technology will be maximized and we'll be able to go into our own worlds and do whatever we want, not impose on anybody's will, and all that stuff. It actually sounds pretty cool, but
yes, technologically, if we can find a way to do that, like, so the hypothesis is that as we gain in technology, we'll get closer and closer to the best possible world. If we could get to a significant enough technological control over the universe, then yes, we would get to the BPW, and we're moving in that direction. That as we gain in technology, we see a proportional shift towards the BPW. But it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get there, because I don't know what the limits of physics are.
And why don't you think that you ought to? Like, why don't you commit yourself to oughts?
Because I think oughts are meaningless.
Meaningless.
So I think, like,
so this is another thing I want to brought up. So like the SCP article on moral naturalism, like I was reading that the other day too. That ends on a note of kind of up in the air. Like I think it ends with Stephen Diablo critiquing Frank Jackson's reductionism of the moral oughts. What do you think of that? I mean, I'm not. If you don't remember, it's fine. It's just like it seems like it'd be. I think it would help your theory, honestly, to say, look, you ought to bring about this world. Society ought to come together to create this technological paradise where you don't have impositions of will anymore.
Well, I just think oughts are meaningless, so it just doesn't mean anything to me to say oughts. Like I could say that if there is, like, there's the dilemma I ask, which is something moral because you ought to do it, or ought you do it because it's moral? Thank you, Cosmic, for the super chat. Appreciate it. Yes, I'm still black and white because of technical difficulties with Whereby is not recognizing my camera color for some reason. Forgot to answer that before.
I have so much more life, vitality.
Yeah. He prayed to God, and God made my screen black and white.
I am the good and light, and TJump is the darkness and evil.
Yeah, yeah. So, about what were we just talking about?
Oh yeah, you said ought because it's moral, moral because it's
yes.
ought.
So is something moral because you ought to do it, or ought you do it because it's moral? Now, if I intuitively try to answer that question, I get the second one. The second horn seems to be correct. How would you answer? Is something moral because you ought to do it?
What was the second one again?
It's the Euthyphro dilemma. Is something moral because you ought to do it, or ought you do it because it's moral?
It's a good question. Let me think about that. I ought to do it because it's moral. And what do you mean by moral? Good, maybe?
I guess.
I ought to do something because it's good. My conceptual schemes are frizzing out again, because the way I understand oughts are in terms of something being right instead of good. And I'm imagining those concepts in my imagination, but I'm fixing the content of those concepts in certain ways. Like rightness has to do with actions, and goodness has to do with states of affairs. Typically, it's the way it's spelled out.
So try to answer it from your perspective, given how you understand morality. Is something moral because you ought to do it, or ought you do it because it's moral? And you can say, if in whatever way you understand morality, enter it from your definition.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm a divine command theorist, so I would say that I ought to do it because the good commands me to do it. So it is axiologically based.
Well, no, so the question is ought you do it because it's moral, or is it moral because you ought to do it? Is something moral because you ought to do it? That's the reason. That's what makes it moral, is that you ought to do it. Or is it, or ought you do something because it's moral based off some independent set of criterion? So what you said is that because the right commands you to do it, that seems to be like an independent set of criterion. It's not that you ought to do it. The oughtness isn't what makes it moral. It's there's something else that makes it moral, and because of that, you ought to do it.
I have to think that out. Like the way I cash it out is just that the commands constitute my obligations.
Well, that's fine. That would be the second horn. So again, the horn, the first horn is something moral because you ought to do it. Is the oughtness what makes it moral, or ought you do something because of some independent set of criterion that makes something moral? And once you have that, then you know you ought to do it. So if you're saying it's God's command, God commands you to do something, that's some set of criterion that is moral. And then once you know that, then you know you ought to do it. But it's not because you ought to do it that makes it moral. It's because God said so that makes it moral.
Well, then I would just say, like, if I endorsed your theory, I would just say you ought to bring about the best of all possible world, because the best of all possible world is good.
Well, you ought to do that, I'm fine with hypothetical imperative. So I'd say that if you think that the best of all possible worlds is good, you ought to do it. That's fine. So I'm fine with using oughts in a hypothetical way, but categorical oughts make no sense to me.
Or like, make no sense. Okay.
because when I ask that dilemma, is something moral because you ought to do it? My answer, well, no, it's not moral because you ought
Yeah.
to do it. Your oughtness isn't what makes it moral. There's something else makes it moral. It's like God's nature, God's commands, whatever. That's why it's moral, is because God said so. And then once God says so, you can use a hypothetical imperative. God said so, therefore I ought to do it. But the ought doesn't play a role. It isn't in the morality anywhere. It's something you apply after you know something is moral.
Okay, so you're making the existence of oughts depend on what you know about
Well, no,
the
no. So
good?
is independent of the existence of oughts. So you can say oughts or whatever you want them to say. The question is morality contingent on oughts? Are oughts in morality anywhere? And so my argument here is that to show that oughts don't exist in what makes something moral. They are not the essence of morality. They're just something we apply after the fact. Whether or not they actually exist doesn't make a difference. So in the core of morality, is something moral because you ought to do it? Well, no, it's not. The oughtness doesn't make it morality. It's moral. We ought to do something because we know it's moral. So we know it's moral based off some independent sets of facts, and then we say we ought to do it. So it's a hypothetical imperative.
Mm-hmm.
But if the answer was the first one, something is moral because we ought to do it, that's a categorical imperative. That oughts are literally the essence of morality. That you need that something is moral because its oughtness is there. And I say that doesn't make any sense. Like, that doesn't follow. It doesn't cohere.
Like when I think about this is typically represented in the literature as ought one adopt a moral point of view, is the way I've seen it represented, and whether or not that should be a rational or a moral ought. And if it's a moral, it sounds circular. If it's rational, maybe there could be rational norms. I'm not sure, but it wouldn't be a part of a moral system. I'd have to think about that. I think I follow what you're saying. I think my mind is turning to mush because we've been talking for too long, but
that's fair. Yeah,
I think I follow what you're saying. I was just trying to get to the bottom. I wasn't even going to debate with you about it. I just was going to get to the bottom of what.
But
what
yeah,
you
that's
thought
why I
about
don't
ought.
use oughts, because oughts don't make sense to me as categorical, and I don't think oughts are necessary in the essence of morality.
If God existed, would categorical oughts make sense? If God was the good, and that kind of
well, categorical oughts can make sense in the fact that they're grounded in something else. But can oughts themselves be the thing that makes something moral? That doesn't make sense. I can't see a connection between oughts making something moral. Something else could be. So God's nature can make it an ought, but that's still a hypothetical ought. If God's nature is perfect morality, then I ought to do it. But that doesn't, in that sense, that would be a categorical ought in the sense that the ought follows from God's nature. But again, the oughtness isn't what makes it moral. The oughtness there doesn't matter to the morality. It's God's nature that matters to the morality. So the oughtness is again an addition that isn't required for morality. And to me, that seems to be the case no matter what. No matter what you define morality to be, oughtness always seems to be an excess addition that doesn't need to be there. So you can say God's nature is perfectly moral. God is the objective standard of morality. Like, okay, do you need oughts to say that? No.
Yeah, I'm thinking about just all the ways that moral philosophers talk about this aspect. I guess it just depends on whether or not you want to apply goodness to actions. And what
that's fine. So applying goodness to actions is fine, but you don't need it. Like, it's not required in morality. You can have morality.
Okay, right.
Without
but you're saying that if you do decide to adopt the moral point of view, you can add it on to motivate actions, maybe.
Yeah. Hypothetical imperative is perfectly fine. Like, you can add on the word ought to any moral statement.
You're coming on board. You're going to come on board and agree with me that the best of all possible worlds is the way I'm saying it is. Then let's bring in some oughts to motivate people to bring that about or something like that. But it's just not the essence of it, you're saying.
Yes. The essence of morality has no oughts in it.
Yeah, I don't think I would say that either, but I wouldn't make that imply that there are no oughts in a moral system. I would just say it's just dependent on whether or not God makes a world with creatures. And so if he doesn't do that, he's not going to issue any commands. And so oughts are kind of contingent on him making a world.
Well, so when I say that, what I mean is that there's no oughts in the morality. So God can add oughts in addition to the morality, but he can't, like, oughts don't make something moral. Something is moral already, and then you can add oughts additionally, just like you can add unicorns or whatever. But the
Just think it's an
oughtness,
extra dimension,
sure,
an inessential dimension, but an extra dimension.
sure,
I
sure.
don't
So you
know.
can add oughts in whatever way you want. It can literally be an existing platonic object. That's fine. But the question is for morality, is it required that inside morality there is this oughtness thing? And I would say, well, no, it doesn't make any sense. You don't need that. Can be added, yeah. Anybody can add that. It's perfectly fine. I'm happy to say you ought to do the best of all possible world stuff, but that oughtness isn't anywhere inside the essence of morality. It isn't anywhere inside the model of morality. It's an addition. I'm saying, okay, well, now that we know what morality is, you ought to do it because I think we ought to do it.
So have you thought about like psychopathy? Like, do you think like with the phenomenon of psychopathy, do you think it's uh it ought to be the well, this might not make sense, never mind. Because I was gonna say the psychopath doesn't adopt a moral point of view. When I was gonna say ought he, but I guess he doesn't have the power to because he doesn't have the mental capacity to recognize the moral realm. So I guess he didn't make sense. Maybe someone who's not a psychopath that just chooses to be a moral monster. It seems like
What
we
like
should
that's a really good
say he
example right there. So
should.
like if you said
Okay.
there's a psychopath who's a moral monster, like do you need oughts to say anything in that? No. You've labeled him immoral. So now we know there is a factually and
Label
moral
him
and immoral
immoral.
case. And we can add on, we can additionally say he ought not do that, but it's irrelevant to the morality. We already have the morality. You've already said he's immoral. And so whether or not
Yeah.
we add that oughtness in there doesn't make a difference.
Maybe just to fill out like descriptive detail about the entirety of the moral situation or something like that. We could do that, but even though it's not necessary to delineate its essence, I think is what you're saying. Okay. I guess I would need to think about that. It's interesting. Okay.
Cool.
Oh, did you come up with the concept of the least imposition
Yes.
or no imposition of will just with your imagination, right?
Yep.
You just used your imagination.
Yep.
I agree with that method. That's a great method.
Well, I do too. I think it's a great method for hypotheses, but
But
then you need some other way to verify it corresponds to reality, which is where the predictions are for.
right, and I would say that the predictions, let's just say for the sake of argument, would be sufficient to adjudicate between imagination and reality, but not necessary. Because then I could just do some a priori type exploration of
I
whether or
think I
not
think they're necessary. I think you must necessarily, or at least necessary insofar as I know. They're not. They might be another way I don't know about, but as far as I know, that's the only way.
it's the only way. See, it's interesting because again, I'm going by the rules that intuition guided research projects have for the success of what they're investigating. But I don't know if you've ever read C.S. Lewis's The Problem of Pain.
Yeah, I
Okay,
was
do you remember? He
required to in
talks
high
about what
school.
you're saying right now. Do you remember that part in Divine Omnipotence? He actually brings this up. This is what interests me.
Which part?
He's like, is it possible? He's talking about what the necessary conditions are for having a world at all with a common like nature, but that would kind of exist between two subjects. And his thinking through whether or not this is possible really reminded me of how you were thinking about the best of all possible worlds. There was a lot of overlap, and you guys are going to disagree. Don't get me wrong, but there was like a lot of overlap.
Hmm.
Um, here, actually, this is I kind of want to get your thoughts. Can I read this to you, or are you
Sure,
running out
go
of
ahead.
time? Okay, let me see. Because I already know you're going to disagree with this, but it was just interesting that he was doing kind of the same thing that you're kind of doing, with speculating about the stuff. I was like, oh wow, I think TJump would like this. So this is on the chapter of omnipotence. Yeah. Okay. And this actually comes from, I don't know, you might like stuff like this. Like he had a great war with this guy named Omar Barfield about all this stuff, the nature and scope and of imagination, and whether or not it latches onto reality. So stuff that you're into, this is imagination, actually latch on to reality. And actually, Omar Barfield thought that it might latch on to certain aspects of it through correct use of metaphor and all this stuff. But that's actually interesting. We'll talk about that later. But he says, let me skip a lot of this stuff. All right. Oh, society, I'm going to skip all that led up to this. Society then implies a common field or world in which its members meet. If there is an angelic society, as Christians have usually believed, then the angels also must have such a world or field, something which is to them as matter is to us. But if matter is to serve as a neutral field, it must have a fixed nature of its own. If a world, quote unquote, or material system had only a single inhabitant, I was like, oh, it's kind of like, it sounds like something that TJump would have. So we're in our own world, right?
Yep.
Before we can enter into other people's worlds, maybe we've got to ask their permission because, we don't want to impose our world on their will and all that stuff. And he says, if a world material system had only a single inhabitant, it might conform at every moment to his wishes. That's exactly what you're saying. It's amazing.
Yep.
Quote, trees for his sake would crowd into a shade. That's so cool. But if you were introduced into a world which thus varied at my every whim, you would be quite unable to act in it and would thus lose the exercise of your free will. This is insane. This is like overlapping exactly kind of with what you're saying.
Well, that part, I definitely disagree there, because you could still have, like, if I had if my world was such that you wouldn't have free will, then obviously you wouldn't have free will. So if C.S. Lewis is admitting
that wouldn't be the best of all possible worlds for you.
So like if C.S. Lewis is admitting he's a moral monster and anybody who enters in world would just lose all of their free will, then yes, that would make sense. But it wouldn't necessarily be the case. Like you could have people who would allow for free will in their world, and other people could be in it just fine.
Exactly right. So like with the background condition, like you didn't get their permission first or whatever. You just found them in your world and you're like, what are you doing here, man? What are you doing? I didn't let you in here. This is immoral. But if you were introduced into a world which thus varied at my every whim, okay, yeah, we just read that. Nor is it clear that you could make your presence known to me. This is interesting. All the matter by which you attempted to make signs to me being already in my control and therefore not capable of being manipulated by you. First of all, I just want to say that this is really cool that he's actually even thinking about this. This is why I like C.S. Lewis a lot. He thinks outside the box. What do you think of that part? Like in the context of what you would conceive as the best possible worlds, that if it's the case, if you were introduced into a world which thus varied at my every whim, and it didn't satisfy your constraint about you didn't ask for my permission first. We're there. We're thrust into existence like with the existentialist without a permission. You would be quite unable to act in it, and thus would lose. It varied at my every whim. You would be quite unable to act in it, and would thus lose the exercise of your free will. Nor is it clear that you could make your presence known to me. All the matter by which you attempted to make signs to me being already in my control, and therefore not capable of being. It looks like the assumption is that we're thrust into this nature, like against our will, and we just find ourselves there. But nature is obeying me and not you. If I chose it, like if I said, look, okay, nature, act on your own. But if I wanted you back and you want to submit to me, then you get to submit to me. But act on your own right now. And it looks like if you were to say, like, hey, it's TJump, Matt, can I come in? And I say, how would I guess what he's asking is, how would I even know if you were knocking, if there wasn't some kind of like involuntary thing going on in the medium there? Like I have to like turn around and be like, I didn't approve of that. What's going on here?
Yeah. It depends on the conditions that you set in your universe. So if you set in your universe that you must agree to literally every action that occurs, then obviously no action could occur that you didn't agree to. And so if someone was in your universe, they could do literally nothing. So you have to consent to literally every particle moving. If someone entered your universe, they could do literally nothing.
Right.
But I don't think many people are going to do that. So it's not something I really worry about. If you don't do that, if you don't have that condition and you say other people can enter my universe and I'd like to know about them, then the universe itself will tell you.
Here's a cosmic doorbell. I'm going to put it right over here. If anybody wants in, you just ring the doorbell, and I may answer, I may not. I mean, I'm probably in a grumpy mood right now.
Yes, also known as the emails, the universe emails.
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean,
or right here, you invited me in.
Yeah, exactly. So to me, it doesn't seem like a legitimate problem that would exist in the best of all possible worlds, because it would only be the case if you set the universe such that only things could happen if you literally consented to each and everything happening, and somehow a soul snuck into your universe before that condition was put into place and is just stuck there.
I wonder, is that possible? Would that be possible? Would outside
Yes,
people
it is
be able
possible.
to
So,
find loopholes into your world without you paying attention to all the ways that you could block them?
well, no, so there
Like
wouldn't be a
I'm the
wouldn't.
dude in Halo, by the way. My character is spinning around in the corner. But that's me. I stink at video games.
So it would only be possible if the person who was in the universe said, "I'm going to allow people to enter my universe without my knowledge, so they can enter if they want to." And
Oh, right. Okay.
someone entered without their knowledge, and then they said, "You know what? I'm going to change it so nothing can happen in my universe without my consent," and then everyone's just stuck. But they'd only be stuck if they would only be stuck if they consented to give up their ability to leave too. So so the person entering would have to consent to give up all of their abilities, to resign themselves to whatever the universe happens to be permanently, and
right.
the owner of the universe would have to like say that anybody can come in without my knowledge, and then wake up and then just change his mind one day and just freeze everything.
You gotta have these little backstop. Like if somebody discovered a loophole and snuck up behind you and slit your throat, you gotta be like, okay, if somebody were to do this, my cells would automatically come back together. And okay, I hope I have a good imagination when I get there.
Yep.
I don't want to get backstabbed. But he says, but then it just switches. At this point, it just says again, if matter has a fixed nature, nobody obeys constant laws, which wouldn't be in the worlds we just talked about. Not all states of matter will be equally agreeable to the wishes of a given soul. And this would actually support what you're saying, to be completely honest. Nor are all equally beneficial for that particular aggregate of matter, which he calls his body. If fire comforts that body at a certain distance, it will destroy it when the distance is reduced. Hence, even in a perfect world, let me see what he says here. Even in a perfect world, the necessity for those danger signals, which the pain fibers in our nerves are apparently designed to transmit. Does this mean, I don't know why that's a perfect world. Does this mean an inevitable element of evil in the form of pain in any possible world? I think not. For while it may be true that the least sin is an incalculable evil, the evil of pain depends on degree, and pains below a certain intensity are not feared or resented at all. No one minds the process warm, beautifully hot, too hot it stings, which warns him to withdraw his hand from exposure to the fire. And if I may, I might skip this part. You're not going to agree with this. If I trust my own feeling, a slight aching in the okay. Yet again, if the fixed nature of matter presents it for being always and in all its dispositions equally agreeable, even to a single soul, much less is it possible for the matter of the universe at any moment to be distributed so that it is equally convenient and pleasurable to each member of a society. Okay, so all of this is dependent on a fixed nature of matter. So your best of all possible worlds undercuts all of this.
Yes.
A fixed nature of matter, if a man traveling in one direction is having a journey downhill, a man going in the opposite direction must be going uphill. If even a pebble lies where I want it to lie, it cannot, except by coincidence, be where you want it to lie. And this is very far from being an evil. This is the only thing. This is actually an interesting thing. What do you think of this?
Well, one second. I wanted to bring up that one point where it said the fixed nature of matter, like obviously matter as in photons, neutrons, electrons, all those can be changed, but there would be a fixed nature to reality in that the law, it's impossible to force anyone to do anything they don't consent to. That would be a fixed nature. That is something that can't be changed. So there still would be a fixed fundamental part of the universe. It just wouldn't be matter. It would just be this law. I partially agree in that if matter as in protons and neutrons and electrons were fixed, that would cause a problem. But there can be a fixed fundamental nature to reality, which can allow for all the things he's saying, which with an equal distribution of matter for everybody. Yes, that is possible with a fixed nature to reality being the one law that it's impossible to force anyone to do anything.
He actually brings that up. Like, were you in agreement with this? Let me see where I'm at. 44. He said, about matter. Where was it at? Stuff. Yeah. Society then implies a common field of world in which its members meet. If there's an angelic society, so it sounds like what you're saying, maybe, unless we decide to have physical bodies. If there's an angelic society, then the angels also must have such a world or field, something which is to them as, quote, matter is to us. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah. So a fundamental essence of the universe, yes.
Photons. Okay, yeah, common field. I think it says, yeah. So what do you think of this? So if you do have this fixed nature of matter, right, in terms of photons and fields and impermeability and all this crap. So Lewis is saying it furnishes occasion for all those acts of courtesy, respect, and unselfishness by which love and good humor and modesty express themselves. But it leaves the way open to a great evil, that of competition and hostility. And if souls are free, they cannot be prevented from dealing with the problem by competition instead of courtesy. And once they have advanced to actual hostility, they can exploit the fixed nature of matter to hurt one another. The permanent nature of wood, which enables us to use it as a beam, also enables us to use it for hitting our neighbor on the head. The permanent nature of matter in general means that when human beings fight, the victory ordinarily goes to those who have superior weapon skill and numbers, even if their cause is unjust. Let me stop right there. The goodness of having a world where you have no involuntary impositions of will would outweigh the complex goods that would result from, and by complex goods, I mean goods that wouldn't result if certain evils weren't possible.
Well,
like what he was saying before about courtesy and
this is where I would disagree,
because
that's you don't need a universal way of matter to get that. You can have matter work in that way in this location and not in this location. So it doesn't need to be a universal one way of matter to have that. You can just have it be that way in this one spot. And so it wouldn't so it's false to say that you need this universal way of matter to get all of those things. You can get all of those things
this
without
is what I was wondering.
The universals.
I was wondering this. So like, okay, I see a world over there. All right, let's see here. I want to go to a world where I'm not going to have a choice about how matter behaves. And I want people to, if they want to, treat me like crap. And I want to grow in virtue in that world over there. But then I can also say, screw virtue. I'm going to go over here with all the blondes, right? And I'm gonna be with a bunch of blondes. You're saying that the greatest of all possible worlds would allow you to, or how would you understand virtue and vice? I guess not in terms of morality, not in terms of actions or rules. Or
assisting
anything,
people's will voluntarily versus would be moral. So it'd be moral. Like if somebody, the greatest example of what you're talking about here is called Dark Souls. Have you heard of Dark Souls?
Crap. Dang, I stink at video games, man.
So Dark Souls.
The last video game I played was Tekken.
So Dark Souls is for average gamers, it is a very, very hard game. It's very frustrating. It causes you a great deal of pain. It would be like choosing to play Dark Souls is like choosing to go to Earth and experience all the pain and rape and stuff. It is a hard
really that
game.
bad? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. You can find videos of YouTubers like punching their TV and throwing their chair across the room. It is hilarious. But it's it's one of the most popular games ever. It's a huge series. There's 5 of them. It's a massive game. It's like Call of Duty big. And it's all of that pain and suffering you're talking about. It's people choosing to go to the world of the pain and suffering rather than the hot blondes. People don't go to the super easy games with just porn games. They don't do that. They go to the hard games. They spend more time playing Dark Souls than they do looking at porn because they enjoy the challenge. And so,
well, real blondes would be better than porn, but go ahead. Sorry.
I've experienced both. I mean, it works the same. It's the same thing. I mean, it's like I play Dark Souls more than I do with blondes. So.
Oh wow, that's amazing. Dark Souls must be hot.
It is. So the point here is that people would choose to go to those difficult worlds to learn from, and that isn't a problem at all.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking is, like, I'm wondering, I'm comparing like 2 different scenarios in my mind. Let me do this. I'll give myself 7 more minutes so I can stop torturing you. I just find this conversation fascinating. I think people like skim over this a little too quickly. I wonder, like, have you read into virtue theory at all?
Some virtue ethics, a little bit. I'm not a fan.
Right. I would think not, because it seems like a necessary condition for virtue theory is that there are things outside of control that you have to conform yourself to. You have to kind of submit your will to making your nature conform to some kind of outside standard in a certain way so as to achieve happiness or something. Like, it doesn't come by nature for me to be patient, let's just say. And I have to read this book, The Secret to Happiness. The secret to happiness is you got to cultivate this virtue called patience and love and justice and courage and all this stuff. And if you cultivate these virtues in yourself, you'll align yourself with capital N nature and you'll attain happiness. It seems to me that in your best of all possible worlds, you could say, look, I'm going to go to a world over there where I need to do that. right? I'm going to go to this world that has a fixed nature and I can't manipulate it, and I'll get the happiness that I want, like in the Dark Souls kind of way, I guess. There's like a fixed, I guess, rules you got to abide by to succeed in Dark Souls. I have no idea how Dark Souls works. But I wonder, but you would argue that if you were just thrust into existence without your permission, into a world that you didn't ask to be created in, and you have to conform yourself to the nature of this world in a virtue theoretic way, that the good that would result from you being stuck here and having to conform yourself to this particular way or mode of living or whatever would not be as good as if you had the choice to say, I'm going to go to Dark Souls world or Blonde's world or Virtue world. Right?
Yes. So choice is better.
So would you say that if a virtue theory was kind of motivated, that would kind of undercut, like if virtue was the way to go, and the way to cultivate virtue would be to undermine this choice that you would have to go between worlds or whatever, that could be a way to falsify your theory? Like, is your theory open to falsification is what I'm asking.
Well, sure. I mean, my testable predictions are false. That would falsify, but I don't know what you mean by the virtue thing. I don't understand.
Can I ask you a question about that real quick?
Sure.
Like, not like your predictions are basically, will the world realize it, right? Like the world will realize the best of all possible.
Well, no, my prediction is that aliens on other planets will follow the same pattern, that AIs will follow the same pattern, that we'll discover this pattern is universal across everywhere in the planet. Like everything in the universe that is intellectual, that has a certain level of intellectual ability and resources will follow its patterns.
Right. But the fact that, but you would still say it's a conceptual truth in your imagination that the best of all possible world is a world in which there is no involuntary imposition of will, regardless of whether or not society like satisfies your prediction or whatever about it being realizing in the world or whatever.
No, not exactly. So I'm saying that there's this literally there's a physical law, a physical emergent result of physical forces that produce this as effect. And so it's not just that our society is going to decide on this, that there's literally a physical law that's decided this.
There's a law that decides it. Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And then, I guess that's why natural theology is just so important. It has a lot of metaphysical consequences because, I mean, if God exists and God's necessary, then this world's impossible, right?
Yep.
Your best of all possible worlds would be impossible if God were necessary and God would, so this is like a key. So, I mean, I would agree with you. I would need to start arguing against these pathetic attempts at establishing the existence of God because it would be incompatible. But
I mean, I definitely think that
the way these natural theological projects interact with your project, though, and how they interact like dialectically, and how we got to get rid of that so we can buttress this and all that crap.
Yeah, that was essentially like the reason I started my channel and started debating theology was because I wrote an epistemology and model of morality, and those I could contrast those very well to theology because they did essentially all the things I thought were wrong and bad, and that I tried to fix with my epistemology. And so, and since it had both a morality and an epistemology, and I can compare mine to both of those, and it could exemplify all of the things I didn't like, it was a good parody. But yeah, I think you're right that if I'm right about objective morality, and objective morality is any involuntary imposition of will, any God that implies involuntary impositions of will is necessarily immoral, and so he couldn't be perfectly good, and so there couldn't be a God.
And you know what I would say? If your conception of this best possible world is possible, and it needs to get rid of God, then it's necessary.
Yep.
That's your ontological argument for your greatest possible world right there.
Yep.
So I got to say, this is why.
I have a genuine intuition that is the case. So
that's perfect. So then now we have to. So I would say this. I would say that, like the ontological argument I think is falsifiable if you do what I've heard you do before. You'll bring up the fact that the attributes are logically incoherent. I think that's a way to get rid of the ontological argument, because then it's not even possible, and then the God concept's impossible.
Sure.
But if your concept of best possible world is possible and coherent, and then I don't know if you want to make up a word called better, sorry, and fix the sense of better. So it would be better if it were necessarily the case. I have an intuition that would be the case. For your world to be the best of all possible worlds, there shouldn't be a possible world out there where your best of all possible worlds isn't the best of all possible worlds, right?
Yes.
That would be conceptually incoherent, right?
Sure.
So yeah, so it would be better if this thing were necessary, not contingent. There we go. So if it's possible, it's necessary. You got your ontological argument for your ethical view.
You just submit a paper, or refute Plantinga and Swinburne, like TJump is the greater philosopher. You can write it. You can do all the work. Submit it. That'd be fine.
It's just Plantinga.
Yeah.
Plantinga.
Yes. Yeah. Swinburne hates that one and the free will one, isn't it? Which one? One of them hates free will. Yeah, I think it's Swinburne hates free will.
Swinburne has weird modal intuitions that we can't correct. Unfortunately, he's by himself. I think he doesn't believe in metaphysical possibility at all as a modal category. He just thinks it's retarded, but he's by himself. What was I also going to say? I wish I had more time to study this. This is a cool thing. I like imagination. I like literature and stuff. So this is actually really cool to think about. This could be like a good Black Mirror kind of episode, but with with not a bleak thing like what the show has, but maybe make it as good as possible to motivate it. Yeah, but I was reading this chapter and I was just like, this is like TJump would love it. Like he says, we can perhaps conceive of a world in which God corrected the results of this abuse of free will by his creatures at every moment, so that a wooden beam became soft as grass when it was used as a weapon, and the air refused to obey me if I attempted to set up in it the sound waves that carry lies or insults. This is like touching on things that you're bringing up. It's so interesting. But such a world would be one in which wrong actions were impossible, and in which therefore freedom of the will would be void. Maybe freedom of action, I would say. Nay, if the principle were carried out to its logical conclusion, evil thoughts would be impossible. For the cerebral matter which we use in thinking would refuse its task when we attempted to frame them. So you would use all of these thoughts that Lewis is having as motivation for accepting your view. Like all this sounds immoral.
Well, I would disagree with a lot of what you said there. So I don't think thoughts aren't immoral. So no thoughts would be restricted here. The grass thing only applies.
Restricted, though.
What?
If your thoughts were restricted though, without your permission?
That'd be moral. Yes, that'd be bad.
Yeah, that would be bad. All matter in the neighborhood of a wicked man would be liable to undergo unpredictable alterations. That God can and does on occasion modify the behavior of matter and produce what we call miracles as part of Christian faith, but the very conception of a common and therefore stable world demands that these occasions should be extremely rare. In a game of chess, you make certain arbitrary concessions to your opponent, which stand to the ordinary rules of the game. As miracles stand to the laws of nature, you can deprive yourself of a castle or allow the other man sometimes to take back a move made inadvertently.
I wouldn't agree with that either. So I would say that miracles don't necessarily need to be rare. Like, for example, in video games, we have miracles all the time. There's miracles, there's magic, there's supernatural stuff. You can have a miracle that heals people, and it's a miracle that happens more often than literally any other spell in the game. It can still be a miracle. So I don't think miracles, by definition, must be rare. They just, by definition, must be a different ontology than the natural world. So it could be... You could just have miracles all the time and they'd still be miracles, just like magic. You'd have magic all the time and it would still be magic. It doesn't need to be rare by definition. That doesn't follow.
Oh. 1 second. Yes. Yes. There was a knock and nobody was at the door. Now what do I do? There was a knock, nobody was at the door.
It was a ghost. It was clearly a ghost.
I would think that aren't a lot of scientists they would say we don't want miracles because it just kind of gets in the way of the scientific project, and you have way too many ceteris paribus clauses for the laws of nature and all this stuff.
No, I don't see a problem with that at all. I'd say that even if there were like random things, like completely, like there is random stuff. We know randomness is a real feature of reality. So there could be other definite features of reality that doesn't invalidate the ones we do know about.
You mean on the micro, like on the quantum level?
Yeah, like even if they're at the macro level, that wouldn't change anything.
Even on the macro level. Okay, yeah, well, I'll bring that up. I just remember pretty much a lot of people that I've read like that have problems with the miracles. They're like, this will be a science stopper. But yeah, I'd have to think about that. It would be hard to predict things, though, on the basis of laws of nature.
Well, you just change the predictions to be probabilistic. You'd say, like, it's probably the case that this dice will roll a 6 unless miracle which happens at this rate.
I guess you could stack on ceteris paribus clauses. You could. But the less the better, I would think.
Sure.
I don't know.
Sure. I mean, the
Maybe.
less the better. But again, quantum mechanics is a thing, but I don't think it matters. Like, I don't think it makes a
Yeah, with
difference.
quantum mechanics, so like with the flock of birds kind of thing. Like any one bird can do unpredictable things, but people can make like large scale predictive kind of calculations about
Yeah,
the thing as a whole.
exactly.
Like I think I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the random stuff happening on the quantum level
Well, I think
as long
miracles
as
work the same way because you'd have some fundamental
okay,
nature to the thing causing the miracles, and so it would follow some kind of a pattern like a flock of birds. And so, as long as it wasn't,
fundamental nature. Okay. And we would have epistemic access to this fundamental nature,
well, that
right?
would be the miracles. The miracles and what they do would be the access.
Gosh, I think I'd want access to whatever's motivating the nature to bring about the miracles personally, but
Well, as if you
I don't
like
know.
prayed to have a miracle or whatever, you would technically have that. Like if it followed some specific methodology, then you would say, "Oh, well,
Maybe.
its nature must cohere to this methodology somehow."
Do you think science would be successful as it is right now, even if like a miracle happened every other second?
Yes,
God, I don't know about that.
I mean, as long as they weren't massive miracles, like the laws of physics change now.
Yeah, well, that's what they're saying. They violate the laws of physics, right?
Well, that's fine. So, like, if you had, like, let's say a gold brick pops into the middle of into existence or whatever, that's fine. If it changes the laws of thermodynamics and then everything in the universe changes, that would invalidate science. But if it just changes like one thing, then no, that would be fine.
One thing, I agree. One thing, because that's the rare thing, which is what Lewis is saying. But lots of miracle. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. Um, okay,
Well, if you think about
almost
it like a
done.
video game, think about you could literally cast miracles on command, thousands of them all the time.
Yes, and you can make predictions about what would happen in that video game realm,
Yeah.
right?
So
Yeah.
science would still work.
Okay.
You'd still say scientifically, when I fire this gun, the bullet will go and hit that person. Oh, and there's a miracle over there. That's fine.
And there would be different laws of nature relative to that video game world, right? That would govern how the magic works if it was emitted from a certain source at a certain victim or whatever,
Well,
right? Maybe.
assume we don't know that. Assume we have no idea what's causing the miracles. We
No
just know we
idea.
can do miracles and that they just
Yeah.
happen. But everything else, a lot of the time, is just the same. So the fact that there are hundreds of thousands of miracles all the time, things falling out of the sky all the time, like I think it reminds me of the past humans. Past humans had no idea how things worked. They thought lightning was a miracle. They thought
Right, right.
volcanoes were
Yeah.
a miracle. So everything was a miracle. They were still doing science just fine, even though many, many things they couldn't explain. And even if they could never have been explained, all of the science they were doing was still working just fine.
With those weird beliefs about, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so if we just grant all
But
of
the
the
thing
Roman
is about
gods.
that, they had wrong beliefs though.
Well, no,
Like
no.
the
So
volcano thing.
assume they were right. Assume the Roman gods are all true. They
We're all
can still do
through.
science. They could still forge. They could still create different kinds of clay and cement. They could still do science. The Greek
No, right.
philosophers
I
and the
think we're saying
natural
different
philosophers
things.
could still do their thing, even if we
They're
granted all
supposed
of
to
the
do the
Greek
thing.
gods existed and all of those miracles existed all the time.
Right, right, right. I think we're saying the same thing because I would say that, yeah, let's grant that they think that what they're committing themselves to are true, like with the pantheon of gods and all that stuff. But in reality, they don't exist, though, right?
Well, no, no. I'm saying like if we grant that those miracles are literally miracles, literally Zeus
They're
exists,
literally miracles.
literally
Okay,
Poseidon exists. They are literally doing miracles at the rate at which
they're
the
literally causing volcanoes
yep,
to erupt. They're
yep.
literally
Zeus is literally up there
okay,
doing a thing with his hammer. So I'm saying there are literally hundreds of thousands of miracles every
right,
day.
and they're still able to do natural philosophy.
Yeah, if we think that was the case, we think there were literally all the Greek gods really existed, and we are living at the time of the Greeks. And if this was true Greek gods, we could still do the natural sciences. The natural philosophers could still do natural philosophy and still do science.
Maybe I'm thinking of a certain kind of miraculous interference, like when you deploy the scientific methods to experiment and make predictions and confirm predictions and all this stuff. Like during the actual experiment, the miracles start tinkering with all of your methods of detecting
Yeah.
whatever it is science is trying to detect to make its explanations. Maybe that would be a science stopper.
Well, I don't think so either, unless it happened literally every time or more than chance. Then it would be. But if as long as it only happened rarely,
There's
we
like
just
an upper bound. Yeah.
yeah, like
Okay.
quantum mechanics does that all the time. We have to repeat the test to make sure that it didn't go wonky. That's why they on
Yeah.
the what's it the thing they sent to the moon. forget the name of the thing, but they had 4 computers, and 3 of the computers were all interlaced, because if one of them got hit by a highly charged photon, it would switch one of the ones to zeros, and the computer would screw up. And so they have other computers to validate that. So even if there was a completely random process that would sometimes miraculously mess with some of the experiments, as long as you could just do other experiments and it wouldn't mess with those, then it would be fine. So it would have to happen at such a rate that it affected like every single experiment or something.
Yeah, so there's an upper bound. It would get to a certain point where science would be impossible. We get all this middle ground where it would still be fine.
Yep.
TJump, I love you. You're amazing. I attribute my love to you, to the stuff I cannot control, the fixed nature of matter. I'm really sorry that I had to intrude on your presence without your permission in this world as a whole, but we got whereby here, so we're going to simulate your best of all possible worlds.
You need to apologize for the 6-hour slog I had to do through your rebuttal to my ontological.
This is insane. Gosh, have I done the record? Is this like the Alex Jones, Joe Rogan thing where it's like 5 hours long?
Yep.
I bet we have like 2 viewers now.
We've had over 100 the entire time.
Oh, geez. Hello, everybody. I'm sorry I disappointed you guys. You guys are amazing. Live long and prosper. Oh, yeah. I have a YouTube channel. It's got 237 subscribers. Quality, not quantity, baby. Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah, for sure. Let's do the.
I was like all prepared for you to like just like attack me, and I was going to be like, because I was trying to prepare for you to act.
Your hair looks funny.
To respond to your views, and then I'm always watching these videos where you're like, "You're an idiot. What are you doing?" Oh crap!
Like the dumpster fires are like less than 10% of my content.
Those are actually very fun to watch. I'm going to admit it.
They get the most views. That is true.
We should do a dumpster fire next.
Yes. Screaming match.
Voluntary dumpster fire.
Voluntary dumpster.
So we're not imposing on each other's will, and we're both just cooperatively lighting a dumpster on fire.
Yes.
Talking about my hair.
Yes.
One-sided cowlick. This is awful.
Oh yeah.
So I got a receding hairline on one side of my head. Right there. Doesn't do it right here. Does it right here.
I cannot evenly cut my hair, so this part is actually lower than this part. This goes. It's like that.
Well, I liked it better when you had a shave to the bone.
Yeah.
See the muscular features of your face.
Yeah, hair works better with the blondes. Like I don't.
Oh, that's awesome.
But yeah,
Asians are so much better than blondes. But I just want to say, I wish you well, man.
Yep. Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. It was a fun conversation. And let me know about
I'll stay in touch with you with the email thing.
Yeah. Let me know about the partnership show thingy. We'll give it a shot. So.
Okay. So you started out here, and here's being a Christian, and I pushed you here.
I guess so. Yeah. like to push me towards being a Christian.
It's all a part of the plan. This is all part of my secret plan. You got caught in my web, man.
If you check my Patreon, there's a section that says I convert to Christianity. You just have to donate $1 million a month.
Oh, I'm working on that right now. Investments. Doing it.
Yeah, I'm getting hungry. I'm gonna need to get off soon. So it was great talking to you.
Oh crap! I'm sorry, man. All right, take it easy.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.